On March 17th, 1874, Ira Johnson, medical student, sat in the law offices of Deems, Wingate, Alden, and Deems, and listened to an unusual proposition. At last he interrupted the senior partner. "Just a moment. Do I understand that you're trying to hire me to marry one of these women?" The lawyer looked shocked.
"Please, Mr. Johnson, not at all. We are simply informing you that if you were to marry one of the young ladies on this list, it would be our pleasant duty to endow each child of such a union according to the scale here set forth."
Ira Johnson scowled and shuffled his feet. "What's it all about? Why?"
"That is the business of the Howard Foundation. One might put it that we approve of your grandparents."
"Have you discussed me with them?" He felt no affection for his grandparents, a tight-fisted foursome. If any one of them had had the grace to die at a reasonable age, he wouldn't now be worried about money enough to finish medical school.
"We have talked with them, yes, but not about you."
The lawyer shut off further discussion, and young Johnson accepted gracelessly a list of young women. When eventually he did marry, from the list, it seemed a curious but not too remarkable coincidence that his wife, as well as himself, had 4 living, healthy, active grandparents. "Mary Sperling, you're a fool not to marry him. You must be nearly 30, and you won't be pretty forever." Mary smiled wryly. "Don't I know it?" "Then you should jump at the chance." "You jump at it. I must run. Service, Ven. Service." Ven frowned at the door as it contracted after her friend. She itched to know why Mary would not marry a prime catch like the Honorable Bork Vanning. She was almost as curious as to where Mary was off to, and why, but the custom of privacy had stopped her from asking. Mary had no intention of letting anyone know where she was going. Outside her friend's apartment, she dropped down a bounce tube to the basement, claimed her car from the Robopark, guided it up the ramp, and set the controls for North Shore. The car waited for a break in the traffic, then dived into the high-speed stream and hurried north. Mary settled back for a nap. When its setting was about to run out, the car beeped for instructions. Mary woke up and glanced out. Lake Michigan was a darker band of darkness on her right. She turned into a narrow dirt road which led down to the shore and stopped. There she waited, lights out, and listened. South of her, the lights of Chicago glowed. A few hundred yards inland, the controlways whined. But here there was nothing but the little timid noises of night creatures. She reached into the glove compartment, snapped a switch. The instrument panel glowed, uncovering other dials behind it. She studied these while making adjustments. Satisfied that no radar watched her and that nothing was moving anywhere near, she snapped off the instruments, sealed the windows, and started up again. What appeared to be a standard Camden speedster rose quietly up into the air, moved out over the lake, dropped into the water, and sank. 17 minutes later, the car surfaced in a pool which occupied much of an artificial cave. Mary got out, said hello to the guards, and went on through a tunnel into a large underground room where 50 or 60 men and women were seated. She chatted until a clock announced midnight. Then she mounted a rostrum and faced them. "I am 183 years old. Is there anyone here who is older?" No one spoke. After a decent wait, she went on. "Then, in accordance with our customs, I declare this meeting opened. Does any family representative have a message? Or does anyone care to speak for himself?" A man caught her eye and spoke up. "Ira Weatherall, speaking for the Johnson family. This meeting's been called nearly 2 months early. The trustees must have a reason. Let's hear it." Mary nodded. "Justin, if you will, please." A prim little man stood up and bowed stiffly. Skinny legs stuck out below his badly cut kilt. He looked and acted like an elderly, dusty civil servant, but his black hair and the firm, healthy tone of his skin said that he was a man in his prime. "Justin Foote, reporting for the trustees. It has been 11 years since the families decided on the experiment of letting the public know that there were, living among them, persons who possessed a life expectancy far in excess of the average. The first offspring resulting from unions assisted by the Howard Foundation were born in 1875. Back then the Foundation was an openly chartered corporation, and no unusual methods of concealment were necessary. But then came the series of world wars and the subsequent reign of the prophets, when any minority group was a target for persecution, discriminatory legislation, and mob violence. The so-called masquerade was adopted as a permanent policy. Means were found to simulate the aging and finally the death of any member of the families who lived to a socially embarrassing age, and to provide him with a new identity in another part of the country. Then civil liberty was re-established in 2075, and the next 50 years saw the renaissance of culture, the steady growth of tolerance and good manners, the increased respect for the custom of privacy and for the dignity of the individual. And so, 11 years ago, we decided on the experiment of letting volunteers, numbering 10% of the total membership of the families, reveal themselves for what they were and observe the consequences, while maintaining all other secrets of the family's organization. The results were, regrettably, different from our expectations." Justin Foote stopped talking. The silence had gone on for several moments, when a solidly built man of medium height spoke up. His hair was slightly grizzled, unusual in that group, and his face looked space-tanned. Mary Sperling had noticed him and wondered who he was. He said, "Speak up, Bud. What's your report?" Foote made his answer to the chair. "Our senior psychometrician should give the balance of the report. My remarks were prefatory." "For the love of... Bud, do you mean to tell me all you had to say were things we already knew?" "My remarks were a foundation, and my name is Justin Foote, not Bud." Mary Sperling broke in firmly. "Brother," she said to the stranger, "will you please name yourself? I'm sorry to say that I don't recognize you." "Sorry, sister. Lazarus Long, speaking for myself." Mary shook her head. "I still don't place you." "Sorry again. That's a masquerade name I took at the time of the first prophet. It tickled me. My family name is Smith. Woodrow Wilson Smith." "Woodrow Wilson Smith? How old are you?" "Eh? Why, I haven't figured it lately. 213 years. Yeah, that's right, 213. There was a sudden, complete silence. "Did you hear me inquire for anyone older than myself?" "Oh, shucks, sister, you were doing all right. I ain't attended a meeting of the families in over a century. Been some changes." I'll ask you to carry on from here." Mary left the platform and found a seat. The man looked around, shrugged, and gave in. Sprawling one hip over a corner of the speaker's table, he announced, "All right, let's get on with it. Who's next?" Ralph Schultz, of the Schultz family, looked more like a banker than a psychometrician. "I was part of the group that proposed ending the masquerade. I anticipated that a few abnormal people would dislike us, even hate us. I predicted that most people would envy us. Everybody who enjoys life would like to live a long time. But I didn't anticipate any serious trouble, since we would be making it clear to them that we owe our peculiarity to our genes. It's just good luck in our ancestry, nothing more. I was wrong. What actually happened was this. They refused to believe us. What they do believe is that we have some scientific secret, a secret which we will not share. Their envy has turned to hate, and that hate is now swelling into a flood that threatens the welfare and even the lives of all our revealed brethren, and which is potentially as dangerous to the rest of us. That's why we asked for this emergency session, because we can expect trouble at any moment. No one argued with him. Not only was Ralph Schultz considered expert in his own field, but also every one of them, each from his own viewpoint, had seen the grosser aspects of the trend building up against their revealed kin. But while the acceptance of the problem was unanimous, there were as many opinions what to do about it as there were people present. Lazarus let the discussion muddle along for 2 hours before he held up a hand.
We aren't getting anywhere, and it looks like we won't get anywhere tonight. Let's take an overall look at it, hitting just the high spots.
He started ticking plans off on his fingers.
We can do nothing, sit tight, and see what happens.
We can junk the masquerade entirely, reveal our full numbers, and demand our rights politically.
We can sit tight on the surface and use our organization and money to protect our revealed brethren, maybe haul them back into the masquerade. We can reveal ourselves and ask for a place to colonize where we can live by ourselves. Or we can do something else. I suggest that you sort yourselves out according to those 5 major points of view, and each group hammer out a plan to present to the families. Now, if I hear no objection, I'm going to declare this lodge recessed until midnight tomorrow night.
He stepped down from the platform. Mary Sperling came up to him and looked him in the eyes. I would like to know you better.
Sure, sis. Why not?
When they reached her apartment, she put tobacco and drink close to him, then went to her retiring room, threw off her street clothes, and put on a soft, loose robe that made her look even smaller and younger than she had looked before. When she rejoined Lazarus, he stood up, struck a cigarette for her, then paused as he handed it to her and gave a gallant and indelicate whistle. She smiled, briefly, took the cigarette, and sat down in a large chair, pulling her feet under her. Lazarus, you reassure me.
Don't you own a mirror?
Not that. You yourself. I've passed the reasonable life expectancy of our people. I've been expecting to die, been resigned to it for the past 10 years. Yet there you sit, years and years older than I am. You give me hope.
You? Expecting to die? Good grief, girl, you look good for another century.
She made a tired gesture. Don't try to jolly me. You know that appearance has nothing to do with it. Appearance is just hormones and symbiotics and gland therapy and some psychotherapy and things like that. But Lazarus, I don't want to die.
We'll outlast the lot of 'em, Mary. Never you fear. But about the meeting tonight, I haven't paid any attention to the news, and I've only recently come Earthside. Does this chap Ralph Schultz know what he's talking about?
I think he must. His grandfather was a brilliant man, and so is his father.
I take it you know Ralph?
Slightly. He's one of my grandchildren.
That's amusing. He looks older than you do.
It suited him to arrest his appearance at about 40, that's all. His father was my 27th child. What plan do you think they'll settle on?
That bunch tonight? Pfft, none, of course. They won't get anywhere. A committee is the only known form of life with 100 bellies and no brain. But presently somebody with a mind of his own will bulldoze them into accepting his plan. I don't know what it will be.
Well, what course of action do you favor?
Me? Why, none. Mary, if there's any one thing I've learned in the past couple of centuries, it's this. These things pass. Wars and depressions and prophets and revolutions and covenants, they pass. The trick is to stay alive through them. He stood up and stretched. But right now, this growing boy could use some sleep.
Me too. Your room's the second door on the right. Shout if you can't find everything you need. She put her face up and kissed him. A quick peck. Night. When Lazarus went to bed, he stepped out of his kilt and chucked it toward a wardrobe, which snagged it, shook it out, and hung it up neatly. Nice catch, he commented, then glanced down and smiled wryly. The kilt had concealed a blaster strapped to one thigh, a knife to the other. He was aware of the present gentle custom against personal weapons, but he felt naked without them, and when he came out of the fresher, he put them where he could reach them before sprawling in sleep. He came instantly awake, with a weapon in each hand, then remembered where he was, relaxed, and looked around to see what had wakened him. It was a murmur of voices through the air duct. He got up, refreshed himself, and went looking for his hostess. As the door to the lounge dilated noiselessly in front of him, the sound of voices became loud and very interesting. The lounge was L-shaped, and he was out of sight. He hung back and listened, shamelessly. Eavesdropping had saved his skin on several occasions. It worried him not at all. He enjoyed it. A man was saying, "Mary, you're completely unreasonable. You know you're fond of me. You admit that marriage to me would be to your advantage. So why won't you?" "I told you, Bork. Age difference." "Well, now, I have a surprise for you on that point. It's a state secret, but I know you can be trusted. And it will be public knowledge in a few days anyhow. Mary, I'll never grow old on you." "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. Mary, they found the secret of eternal youth. You know these old Johnnies that call themselves the Howard families?" "I've heard of them, of course. But what of it?" "They're fakes." "Not at all. I know. The administration's been quietly investigating their claims. Some of them are unquestionably more than 100 years old. We don't have their secret yet, but we'll have it shortly. They're all to be picked up and questioned. What do you think of that?" "It would be nice if everyone could live a long time." "Well, yes, I suppose it would, but in any case, you and I will receive the treatment, whatever it is." "Wait a moment, Bork. This secret, it wouldn't be for everybody?" "Well, now, that's a matter of high policy. Population pressure's a pretty unwieldy problem even now. In practice, it might be necessary to restrict it to essential personnel and their wives." "You mean I'll have it if I marry you?" "Well, that's a nasty way to put it, Mary." "In any case, just how do you propose to get this secret out of them?" Lazarus could almost hear his wise nod. "Oh, they'll talk. We'll use means, ways that the prophets used, if they don't cooperate willingly." "Do you mean that? That's against the covenant." "Covenant be damned. This is a matter of life and death. Do you think we'd let a scrap of paper stand in our way? Look, I'm sorry I ever brought it up. Why not just marry me and not bother your head about matters of public policy?" "Marry you? Never." "Give me just one good reason why not." "I'll tell you why. Because I'm one of those people you want to persecute." There was another pause. "Mary, you're not well." "Not well? Listen to me, you fool. I have grandsons twice your age. I was here when the first prophet took over the country. I was here when Harriman launched the first moon rocket. You weren't even a squalling brat. Your grandparents hadn't even met when I was a woman grown and married. And you stand there and glibly propose to torture me and my kind? Marry you? I'd rather marry one of my own grandchildren." "Take it easy, Mary. Sit down." "Take your hands off me." Lazarus stepped into the room and pointed at Vanning with his blaster. "This monkey giving you trouble, sis?" Vanning jerked his head around. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Lazarus still addressed Mary. "Say the word, sis, and I'll cut him into pieces small enough to hide." "No, Lazarus, thanks just the same. Put your gun away." "Okay." Lazarus holstered his gun, but let his hand rest on the grip. "Who are you?" repeated Vanning. "What's the meaning of this intrusion?" "I'm another one of those old Johnnies you're looking for, like Mary here." Vanning looked at him keenly. "I wonder," he said. He looked back at Mary. "It can't be. It's preposterous. Still, it won't hurt to investigate your story." He moved toward the video phone. "Better get away from that phone, bud. Don't worry, sis, I won't touch my gun. I'll use my knife." Vanning turned. "I'm leaving. If you're wise, Mary, you'll come with me." She shook her head. He looked annoyed, shrugged, and faced Lazarus Long. "As for you, sir, your primitive manners have led you into serious trouble. You'll be arrested shortly." It was scant minutes after Vanning had gone, but when they stepped out into the public hall, they met a man whose brassard and hypo kit marked him as a proctor. "Service," he said. "I'm looking for a citizen in company with Citizen Mary Sperling. Could you direct me?" "Sure," Lazarus agreed. "She lives right down there." He pointed at the far end of the corridor. As the peace officer looked in that direction, Lazarus tapped him carefully on the back of the head, a little to the left, with the butt of his blaster, and caught him as he slumped. They dropped to the parking level. Once the car was on beamed control and headed north for the family's seat, Mary asked to be excused and caught a few minutes' sleep. Lazarus watched a few miles of scenery, then nodded himself. They were awakened by the jangle of the emergency alarm and by the speedster slowing to a stop. Mary reached up and shut off the alarm. "All cars resume local control," intoned a voice. "Proceed at speed 20 to the nearest traffic control tower for inspection. All cars resume local control. Proceed at—" She switched that off, too. "Well, that's us," Lazarus said cheerfully. "Got any ideas?" Mary peered out and studied their surroundings. The steel fence separating the high-speed control-way they were on from the uncontrolled local traffic strip lay about 50 yards to their right. She started the car again, operating it manually, and wove through traffic. As they got close to the fence, Lazarus felt himself shoved into the cushions. The car surged and lifted, clearing the barrier by inches. Mary set it down, rolling on the far side. A car was approaching from the north, and they were slashing across its lane. The other car was moving no more than 90, but its driver was taken by surprise. Mary was forced to duck left, then right, then left again. The car slewed and reared up on its hind wheel, writhing against the steel grip of its gyros. Mary fought it back into control to the accompaniment of a teeth-shivering grind of Herculean against glass. Lazarus let his jaw muscles relax and breathed out gustily. "Whew! I hope we don't have to do that again." Mary glanced at him, grinning. "Women drivers make you nervous?" "I just wish you'd warn me when something like that's about to happen." "I didn't know myself." Mary drove with one hand while she fumbled in the glove compartment. "Answer," a voice said. "Life is short." "But the years are long." "Not while the evil days come not." The voice relaxed. "Okay, Mary, I've checked you. How's things?" "I'm in trouble. Get a fix on me." "Done." She explained hurriedly the details of what she wanted, stopping once to ask Lazarus if he could swim. "That's all," she said at last, "but move. We're short on minutes." While she had been talking, Mary had turned off from the local traffic strip into the unpaved road she had followed the night before, without slowing and apparently without looking. Lazarus gritted his teeth and hung on. They passed a weathered sign reading, "Contaminated area. Proceed at your own risk." Lazarus blinked at it and shrugged. He couldn't see how, at the moment, his hazard could be increased by a neutron or so. Mary slammed the car to a stop in a clump of stunted trees near the abandoned road. The lake lay at their feet, just beyond a low bluff. She unfastened her safety belt, struck a cigarette, and relaxed. "Now we wait. It'll take at least half an hour for them to reach us. Do you think we were seen turning off into here?" "Tell you the truth, Mary, I was too busy to look." The communicator spoke. "Okay, Mary, the sub's right in front of you." "Already?" "Pete Hardy was available in the Evanston pen," said the voice. "So we homed him in on you. Quicker." "Okay, thanks." She was turning to speak to Lazarus when he touched her arm. "Look behind us." Less than 100 yards from them, a Proctor helicopter was touching down. Mary jerked open the door of the car and threw off her gown in one unbroken motion. She turned to Lazarus and called, "Come on!" as she tore a stud loose from the instrument panel. She ran. Lazarus unzipped the belt of his kilt and ran out of it as he followed her to the bluff. The blast shook them as the car exploded, but the bluff saved them. They hit the water together. There was a good chance that the Proctors had been killed in the explosion, but they couldn't be sure. So Mary decided not to call the seat from the sub. It would just increase the hazard of detection. She calmed herself and waited, huddled small in a passenger seat too cramped for two. By the time they surfaced in the pool inside the seat, she had decided against any physical means of communication. Instead, she hoped to find a telepathic sensitive ready and available. Sensitives were as scarce among healthy members of the Howard families as they were in the rest of the population, but the very inbreeding which had conserved and reinforced their abnormal longevity had also conserved and reinforced bad genes as well as good. They had an unusually high percentage of physical and mental defectives, and almost 5% of them were telepathically sensitive. Mary went straight to the sanctuary in the seat, with Lazarus Long at her heels. She braced the matron. "Where's little Stephen? I've got to get a message out to all the families." The matron planted her hands on her hips. "You can't come in here disturbing my children at all hours. I won't have it. Janice, please, take me to Stephen. It wouldn't do you any good if I did. He's had one of his bad spells today. Then take me to the strongest sensitive who's well enough to work. Quickly, Janice. The safety of every member may depend on it." The matron looked doubtful. While Lazarus was trying to recall how long it had been since he had socked a lady, she gave in. "All right, you can see Billy. Mind you don't tire him out." Still bristling, she led them along a corridor, past a series of cheerful rooms, and into one of them. Lazarus glanced at the figure on the bed and looked away. The figure stirred. Its eyes rolled loosely, then seemed to track. It grinned. "Aunt Mary! Did you bring Billy Boy something?" "Not this time, hon. Aunt Mary was in too much of a hurry. Next time? A surprise? Will that do?" "All right." "That's a good boy." She reached out and tousled his hair. Lazarus looked away again. "Now, Billy Boy, can you hear your friends?" "Oh, sure." "All of them?" "Uh-huh. Mostly they don't say anything." "Call to them." There was a very short silence. "They heard me." "Fine. Now listen carefully, Billy Boy. All the families, urgent warning. Elder Mary Sperling speaking. The administrator is about to arrest every revealed member. The council are determined to use any means at all to try to squeeze out of us the so-called secret of our long lives. They even intend to use the tortures developed by the prophets. Get busy. Find them. Warn them. Hide them. You may have only minutes left to save them." Mary went off to make a full report to the resident secretary. Lazarus left her on business of his own. He hunted down some clothes and a bite of breakfast, about 3,000 calories of sausages, eggs, jam, hot breads, coffee, and ancillary items, and then went looking for a news box. He found one in the bachelor's library, off their lounge. The room was empty, save for one man, who seemed to be about the same age as that suggested by Lazarus' appearance. There the resemblance stopped. The stranger was slender, mild in feature, and was topped off by fine-spun, carroty hair. He was bending over the news receiver with his eyes pressed to the microviewer. Lazarus cleared his throat loudly and said, "Howdy." The man jerked his head up and exclaimed, "Oh, sorry, I was startled. Do you have service?" "I was looking for the news box. Mind if we throw it on the screen?" "Not at all." The smaller man stood up, pressed the rewind button, and set the controls for projection. "Any particular subject?" "I wanted to see if there was any news about us, the families." "I've been watching for that myself. Perhaps we'd better use the soundtrack and let it hunt." "Okay." Lazarus stepped up and changed the setting to audio. "What's the code word?" "Methuselah." Lazarus punched in the setting. The machine chattered and whined as it scanned. The other man turned toward him. I should have introduced myself. I'm Andrew Jackson Libby.
Lazarus Long.
I know. I was at the meeting last night.
Libby.
Lazarus mused.
Don't seem to place it in the families. Seems familiar, though.
My case is a little like yours.
Changed it during the interregnum, eh?
Got it. You're Slipstick Libby, the calculator.
Libby grinned sheepishly.
I have been called that. The last can I piloted was equipped with your paragravitic rectifier, and the control bank used your fractional differential on the steering jets. I'm glad to have fallen in with you. The news box slowed with a triumphant click. Ensenada, Baja California. Jeffers and Lucy Weatherall today asked for special Proctor protection, alleging that a group of citizens had broken into their home, submitted them to personal indignity, and committed other asocial acts. The Weatheralls are, by their own admission, members of the notorious Howard families. Libby turned to Lazarus. That's the first case of social group violence in more than 20 years, and they reported it like a breakdown in a weather controller. The box was still speaking. The dawn of a new day, the jealously guarded secret of a selfish few, will soon— Lazarus switched it off. The borough, known as the family's seat, became jammed as the day wore on. Members kept trickling in, arriving by tunnels from downstate and from Indiana. At midnight, Lazarus climbed onto the rostrum.
Okay, let's pipe it down. Before we get to arguing, I want a report from the chief trustee. How about it, Zach? Any of our kinfolk get nabbed?
Zachar Barstow did not need to identify himself. He simply said, Mary Sperling's warning was amazingly successful, but we still have 179 revealed cousins who haven't made it into hiding.
Any reasonable chance that all of them will make it home safe?
Absolutely none.
Why?
Because 3 of them are known to be in public conveyances between here and the moon, traveling under their revealed identities. Lazarus shrugged.
That tears it. Kinfolk, the game's over. One shot in the arm of Babble Juice, and the masquerade is ended. It's a new situation, or it will be in a few hours. What do you propose to do about it?
Some hours later, Lazarus rapped on the table beside him, using the butt of his blaster as a gavel.
Go ahead, but cut it short.
Bertram Hardy nodded curtly.
I say again, these mayflies we see around us have no rights that we of the families are bound to respect. We should deal with them with stealth, with cunning, with guile, and, when we eventually consolidate our position, with force.
There was no applause, but Lazarus could see wavering uncertainty in many faces. Hardy's ideas ran counter to thought patterns of many years of gentle living, yet his words seemed to ring with destiny. Lazarus did not believe in destiny. He believed in— well, never mind. But he wondered how Brother Bertram would look with both arms broken. Eve Barstow got up.
Let's disclose ourselves, tell all of the truth, and ask for our share of the earth, some little corner where we may live apart. If our poor friends wish to surround it with a great barrier like that around Coventry, so be it. It's better that we never meet face to face.
Some expressions of doubt changed to approval. Ralph Schultz stood up.
It's my professional opinion that the psychological insulation Eve proposes cannot be accomplished that easily. As long as we're on this planet, they won't be able to put us out of their minds. Modern communications.
Then we must move to another planet.
Where? Demanded Bertram Hardy.
Venus? I'd rather live in a steam bath. Mars? Worn out and worthless. There's only one planet in the solar system fit to live on, and we're standing on it.
Lazarus spoke over the response.
Folks, before we table this idea of moving to another world, let's consider all the possibilities.
He waited until he had their full attention.
Did you ever stop to think that not all the planets swing around this one sun?
Zachar Barstow broke the silence. Lazarus, are you making a serious suggestion?
Dead serious. There's a spaceship hanging out there in the sky, a roomy thing, built to make the long jumps between stars.
The experimental ship?
The New Frontiers, that's the girl. Why don't we take her and go looking for our own piece of real estate?
Bertram Hardy was first to recover. The reckless fools who are actually intending to man that ship expect to take about a century to make the trip. Then maybe their grandchildren will find some planet that's habitable, or maybe they won't. Either way, I'm not interested. I don't care to spend 100 years locked up in a steel tank, nor do I expect to live that long. I won't buy it.
Hold it. Where's Andy Libby?
Here.
Libby stood up. Slipstick, did you have anything to do with designing that ship?
No.
Lazarus spoke to the crowd. That settles it. If that ship didn't have Slipstick's finger in the drive design, then she's not as fast as she could be, not by a good big coefficient. Better get busy on the problem, son. We're likely to need a solution.
A messenger hurried in and spoke to Barstow. He looked startled and seemed to ask to have the message repeated. He then hurried across the rostrum to Lazarus, whispered to him, and hurried out. Lazarus looked back at the crowd.
We'll take a recess. Give you time to think about other plans and time for a stretch and a smoke.
He reached for his pouch. "What's up?" someone called out. Lazarus struck a cigarette, took a long drag, let it drift out.
It seems the Federation administrator wanted to talk to Zach Barstow right away. He asked for him by name, and he called over our secret family's circuit.
The Honorable Slayton Ford studied Barstow's face as the image appeared in his phone. A good face, and strong. It would be useless to try to bully this man. And the man looked young. Why, he looked younger than Ford himself. The subconscious image of the administrator's own stern and implacable grandfather faded out of his mind, and his tension eased off.
"You are Citizen Zachar Barstow?"
"Yes, Mr. Administrator."
"You are the chief executive of the Howard families?"
"I am the current speaker-trustee of our family's foundation, but I am responsible to my cousins rather than in authority over them." Ford brushed it aside.
"I assume that your position carries with it leadership. I can't negotiate with 100,000 people."
Barstow did not blink. He saw the power play in the sudden admission that the administration knew their true numbers, and discounted it. It simply proved that one or more members had indeed been caught and forced to talk. So it was now almost certain that the authorities already knew every important fact about the families. Barstow answered without noticeable pause. "What is it you wish to discuss with me, sir?"
"The policy of the administration toward your kin group, the welfare of yourself and your relatives."
Barstow shrugged. "What can we discuss? The covenant's been tossed aside, and you've been given power to do as you like with us, to squeeze a secret out of us that we don't have."
"Suppose I tell you that I know there's no such secret."
"How can you reconcile that with the persecution of my people? You've been harrying us like rats." Ford made a wry face.
"Most of the council do believe that you're hiding something. If I try to go against them, there'll be a vote of confidence, and I'll be out of office. I prefer to stay and try to cope with the problem."
Barstow chewed his lip.
"Suppose you went before the public." "I wouldn't last long enough to make this speech." He sighed deeply. "Zachar Barstow, can you understand the bitter, bitter jealousy of the ordinary man of, say 50, who looks on one of your sort? 50 years. 20 of them he's a child. He's well past 30 before he's skilled in his profession. He's 40 before he's established and respected. Only for the last 10 years of his 50 has he really amounted to something."
Ford leaned forward in the screen and spoke with sober emphasis.
"And now, when he's reached his goal, what's his prize? His eyes are failing him. His bright young strength is gone. His heart and wind are not what they used to be. He's not senile yet, but he feels the chill of the first frost. He knows what's in store for him. He knows. He knows. Once
It was inevitable, and each man learned to be resigned to it. But now, death plays favorites. Now you come along and you blithely undertake plans that won't mature for 50 years, for 100. Is it any wonder that he hates you?
Barstow raised his head wearily. Do you hate me, Slayton Ford?
Oh, no, I can't afford to hate anyone. Now, let's be practical. Individually, you old ones are doubtless honorable, lovable men. But as a group, you're as dangerous as carriers of plague, so you must be quarantined.
Barstow nodded. Well, a segregated colony? Madagascar, perhaps? Or we might take the British Isles, build them up again. Ford shook his head.
No, you and your kin must leave this planet entirely. Take your choice of the solar system, anywhere you like.
Barstow shook his head. Is that any better solution in the long run than giving us a reservation on Earth? Sooner or later, your people and mine would come into contact again. Are you going to put a stop to space travel? Ford turned that over in his mind. The man was right. A permanent and effective quarantine was impossible. That left only one answer. An ugly one. But Ford was tough-minded. He could accept what was necessary. He started making plans. Barstow's presence in the screen forgotten. The only point left undecided in his mind was whether to liquidate them all or simply to sterilize them. Either would be a final solution, but which was the more humane? Mr. Administrator.
Eh? Oh, sorry. I was preoccupied.
That was a vast understatement. Ford was shockingly embarrassed to find himself still facing a man he had just condemned to death. He gathered formality about him like a robe.
Thank you, Zachar Barstow, for talking with me. I'm sorry that...
Mr. Administrator, I propose that you move us entirely out of the solar system.
What?
Ford blinked.
Are you speaking seriously?
Barstow talked rapidly, persuasively, explaining Lazarus Long's half-conceived scheme, improvising details as he went along, skipping over obstacles and emphasizing advantages.
It might work, Ford said at last. There are difficulties you haven't mentioned, political difficulties, and a terrible hazard of time. Still, it might.
He stood up.
Go back to your people. Don't spring this on them yet. I'll talk with you later.
Lazarus Long's face stared out of the screen into that of the administrator. Got it all canned? Ford pressed a switch.
Got it.
Okay, I'm clearing. The screen went blank. Ford summoned his High Chief Provost.
Take this.
He pressed a stud. A film spool popped out of the facsimilator on his desk.
This is a complete list of the Howard families, all 100,000 of them. Arrest them.
Lazarus reported to Barstow. Deed's done. The senior trustee looked uncertain. Did he ask why the information was coming from you and not me?
Just told him you were busy. Zach, quit worrying. Now you can put your hand on your heart and tell the members it wasn't you who shopped them to the law.
When the Proctors arrived in force at the family's seat, Lazarus Long was aware that he should submit peacefully and conspicuously to arrest, set a good example. But old habits die hard. He postponed the inevitable by ducking into the nearest men's fresher. It was a dead end. He glanced at the air duct. No, too small. When a proctor stuck his head into the room, Lazarus planted a short jab under the man's breastbone, and in a few moments he left the fresher dressed like a cop and with a bandolier of paralysis bombs slung under his left arm. He walked into a hall which was crowded with members herded into a group. Lazarus ignored his kin and sought out the harassed officer in charge. "Sir," he reported, saluting smartly, "there's a sort of hospital back there. You'll need 50 or 60 stretchers." Don't bother me. Tell your legate. We've got our hands full. Lazarus almost did not answer. He had caught Mary Sperling's eye in the crowd. She stared at him and looked away. He caught himself and answered, "Can't tell him, sir. Not available." "Well, go outside and tell the first aid squad." "Yes, sir." He moved away, swaggering a little, his thumbs hooked in the band of his kilt. He was far down the passage leading to a Transbelt tunnel serving the Waukegan outlet when he heard shouts. 2 proctors were running to overtake him. They got no further. A paralysis bomb tinkled and popped at their feet. The first looked surprised as the radiations wiped all expression from his face. His mate fell across him. No one else was in sight. Lazarus mounted the Transbelt. Perhaps they hadn't been looking for him in his proper person. Perhaps no one had given him away. But he didn't hang around to find out. One thing he was damn well certain of, he told himself. If anybody had squealed on him, it wasn't Mary Sperling. Lazarus found a middle-priced hotel without drawing attention by asking questions, dialed its registration board for a standard suite, and settled down for 7 hours of sound sleep. He breakfasted in his suite, listening with half an ear to the news box. A phrase caught his attention. "Including Zachar Barstow, alleged to be their tribal chief. The prisoners are being shipped under armed guard to a reservation compound in Oklahoma." Lazarus switched it off. "Damnation," he thought. "Don't fret about things you can't help." Of course, he had expected to be arrested himself, but he had escaped. That was that. It wouldn't do the families any good for him to turn himself in. And besides, he owed the families nothing, not a tarnation thing. But he wondered how Zach was getting along, and what he would think of Lazarus' disappearance. And what Mary Sperling thought. He wished he could straighten things out with her. Not that it mattered what any of them thought. They would all either be light years away very soon, or dead. A closed book. Lazarus decided to pick up his private convertible cruiser, I Spy, and head out into space. Paying his score and finding a jet for hire occupied less than 20 minutes. He took off and headed for Goddard Field. But long before he reached there, while over eastern Kansas, he decided to land. He picked the field of a town so small as to be unlikely to rate a full-time proctor, and there he sought out a phone booth. Inside it, he hesitated. How did you go about calling up the head man of the entire Federation and get him? "Department of Civil Safety," a voice answered. "What service, citizen?" "Service to you. I'm Captain Sheffield. Give me the chief." Short silence. Then, "What is it about, please?" "I said I was Captain Sheffield." Another short pause. "I'll connect you with the Deputy Provost's office." There had been doubt in the voice. This time the screen came to life. "Yes?" asked the deputy, looking him over. "Get me the chief," demanded Lazarus. "Hurry!" "What's it about?" "Good Lord, man, get me the chief." The deputy must be excused for connecting him. He'd had no sleep, and more confusing things had happened in the last 24 hours than he had been able to assimilate. When the High Chief Provost appeared in the screen, Lazarus spoke first. "Oh, there you are! I've had the damnedest time cutting through your red tape. Give me the old man, and move! Use your closed circuit." "What the devil do you mean? Who are you?" "Listen, brother, I wouldn't have routed through your damned hidebound department if I hadn't been in a jam. Cut me into the old man. This is about the Howard families." Slayton Ford, the Federation administrator, looked flabbergasted when he recognized Captain Sheffield in the screen. "You? How on earth—" Lazarus cut in. "Seal your circuit." The chief provost, listening in, blinked as his screen went dead and silent. So the old man did have secret agents outside the department. Interesting, and not to be forgotten. Lazarus gave Ford a quick and fairly honest account of how he happened to be at large, then added, "So you see, I could have gone to cover and escaped entirely. In fact, I still can. But I want to know this. Is the deal to let us emigrate still on?" "Yes, it is." Have you figured out how you're going to get 100,000 people inboard the New Frontiers without tipping your hand? You can't trust your own people, you know that.
I know.
Well, I'm the man for the job, said Lazarus. I've got to be. I'm the only agent on the loose that you can afford to trust. Now, listen. Buying a passenger ship big enough to ferry the families from Earth up to where the New Frontiers hung in her construction orbit would not be difficult, and money was no problem. The administrator had arranged a sizable and untraceable letter of credit. But a passenger ship wouldn't do. He couldn't pilot it single-handed. It would have to be a freighter. And Lazarus knew the best and most discreet place to find one. By early that evening, he was seated in the I Spy on Goddard Field, awaiting his clearance to take off for the moon. A thought hit him, and he loosened his straps and reached for his copy of the current Terra Pilot and Traffic Hazard Supplement. New Frontiers hung in a circular orbit of exactly 24 hours, keeping always over meridian 106 degrees west. Why not pay her a call? Scout out the lay of the land. They were pleased to have visitors. The ship was completed save for inspection, trials, and acceptance. The enormous gang which had constructed her had gone, and there was no one aboard but a few engineers, bored with inactivity, bored with each other, anxious to quit marking time and get back to the pleasures of Earth. When the I Spy's airlock had been sealed to that of the big ship, Captain Sheffield was met by the engineer in charge. He introduced himself and took Lazarus on a tour. They floated through miles of corridors, visited laboratories, storerooms, libraries containing hundreds of thousands of spools, acres of hydroponic tanks for growing food and replenishing oxygen, and comfortable, spacious, even luxurious quarters for a crew colony of 10,000 people. What Lazarus really wanted to see was the control room, and there he lingered, asking endless questions until his host was plainly bored and remaining only out of politeness. Lazarus finally shut up, not because he minded imposing on his host, but because he was confident that he had learned enough about the controls to be willing to chance conning the ship. Slayton Ford had given Lazarus his private message code. This time his call went straight through to the administrator. From the puffy circles under Ford's eyes, Lazarus judged that he had been living at his desk. "Hi. Better get Zach Barstow on a three-way. I've got things to report." He told them about the City of Chillicothe, the giant freighter he'd purchased from the Luna colony. In his mind, he'd shortened the name to Chili in honor of a favorite dish he'd not tasted in a long time. Real meat, not the synthetic pap these youngsters called meat. And of his reconnaissance of the New Frontiers. "Now, here's how I see it. This coming weekend, the skeleton crew up on the New Frontiers are all heading dirt side for a break. There'll be just one, maybe two men aboard. I set the Chili down in the prison reservation. We load up in a hurry, rush out to the New Frontiers, grab her, and scoot. Now, Mr. Administrator, that calls for a lot of help from you." Ford looked at him sourly. "Give me credit for some foresight. I know you'll have to have a diversion. But we can't wait 4 days." "Why not?" "The situation won't hold together that long. The council meets again tomorrow afternoon, and I won't survive. It has to happen inside 12 hours. As the Chili dropped through the stratosphere, Lazarus saw that Oklahoma and half of Texas were covered with deep, thick storm clouds. Ford's diversion. He was amazed and somehow pleased. It reminded him of other days, when weather was something experienced rather than controlled. Life had lost some of its flavor when the weather engineers had learned how to harness the elements. Then he was down in the storm, and too busy to meditate. He wheeled her in, cut his last jet as she scraped, and slapped a series of switches. The great cargo ports rumbled open, and the rain beat in. When Barstow could see that loading would be finished in a few more minutes, he left his post at one of the ports and ran as fast as he could through the splashing, sticky mud to the communications shack. He fumbled with an awkward, unpowered door, swung it open, and rushed in to connect directly to Ford. He was answered at once, but it was not Slayton Ford's face on the screen. Barstow burst out with, "Where's the administrator? I want to talk to him," before he recognized the face in front of him. It was a face well known to all the public. Bork Vanning, leader of the minority in the council. "You're talking to the administrator," Vanning said, and grinned coldly. "The new administrator. Now who the devil are you, and why are you calling?" Barstow thanked all gods, past and present, that recognition was one-sided. He cut the connection with one unaimed blow and plunged out of the building. 2 cargo hatches on the Chile were already closed. Stragglers were moving through the other 2. Barstow hurried the last of them inside with curses and followed them, then slammed pell-mell to the control room. "Raise ship," he shouted to Lazarus. "Fast!" Lazarus was already closing and sealing the ports on the Chile. He tripped the acceleration screamer, waited a scant 10 seconds, and gave her power. 6 minutes later, he remarked conversationally, "Well, I hope everybody was lying down. If not, we've got some broken bones on our hands. What's that you were saying?" Barstow told him about his stymied attempt to report to the Federation administrator, Slayton Ford. Lazarus blinked and whistled a few bars of Turkey in the Straw. "It looks like the jig's up. It does look like it." He shut up and gave his attention to his instruments, one eye on his ballistic track, one on radar aft. Lazarus had his hands full to jockey the Chile into just the right position against the side of the New Frontiers, but he did it. The magnetic anchors clanged home. The gas-tight seals slapped into place, and their ears popped as the pressure in the Chile adjusted to that in the giant ship. Lazarus dived for the drop hole in the deck of the control room, pulled himself rapidly, hand over hand, to the port of contact, and reached the passenger lock of the New Frontiers to find himself facing the skipper-engineer. The man looked at him and snorted. "You again, eh? Why the deuce didn't you answer our challenge? You can't lock onto us without permission. This is private property. What do you mean by it?" "It means," said Lazarus, "that you and your boys are going back to Earth a few days early, in our ship here." "That's ridiculous." Lazarus' blaster was suddenly growing out of his left fist. "Brother, I'd sure hate to hurt you after you were so nice to me, but I sure will, unless you knuckle under awful quick." The official simply stared unbelievingly. Several of his juniors had gathered behind him. One of them, sun-fished in the air, started to leave. Lazarus winged him in the leg, at low power. He jerked and clutched at nothing. That settled it. The skipper called together his men. Lazarus counted them as they arrived, 29, a figure he had been careful to learn on his first visit. He assigned 2 men to hold each of them. Then he took a look at the man he had shot. "You aren't really hurt, bub. As soon as we transfer you, get some radiation salve on that burn. The Red Cross kit's on the afterbulkhead of the control room." "This is piracy. You can't get away with this." "Probably not, but I sort of hope we do." He turned his attention back to his job. "Shake it up there. Don't take all day." The Chile was slowly being emptied. Only the one exit could be used, but the pressure of the half-hysterical mob behind them forced along those in the bottleneck where the 2 ships were joined. They came boiling out like bees from a disturbed hive. Most of them had never been in zero gravity before this trip. They burst out into the larger space of the giant ship and drifted, helplessly, completely disoriented. A man broke loose from the stream. "Lazarus! There's a ship trying to lock onto ours. I saw it through a port." "Where?" The man was handicapped by slight knowledge of ships and shipboard terms, but he managed to make himself understood. Lazarus holstered his blaster and fought his way back through the swirling mob in the bottleneck. Number 3 port seemed to be the one the man had meant. Yes, there was something there. The port had an armor-glass bullseye in it, but instead of stars beyond, Lazarus saw a lighted space. He slithered cautiously alongside the bullseye and sneaked a peep. Lazarus found himself staring at Slayton Ford. He pulled himself to one side and pressed the switch to open the port. He waited there, a toe caught in a handy-hold, blaster in one hand, knife in the other. Ford emerged. "I want to go with you, if you'll have me." Lazarus went back to the bullseye. Why, the ship wasn't a proper deep spacecraft at all. It was a little private strato-yacht, and it must surely have exhausted its fuel getting up into orbit. "Suppose we turned you down. How'd you figure on getting back?" "I didn't figure on it." Tell me what happened down there, but make it March. We're minus on minutes." Ford had burned all bridges. Turned out of office, he had known that once the facts came out, lifelong imprisonment in Coventry was the best he could hope for, if he managed to avoid mob violence or mind-shattering interrogation. So he'd gone for broke. Lazarus liked that. It took courage and character that most people don't have. He looked at Ford. "Of course you're coming along. You're my kind of boy, Slayton." The Chili was more than half emptied now, but the spaces near the interchange were still jammed with frantic mobs. Lazarus cuffed and shoved his way through, trying not to bruise women and children unnecessarily, but not letting the possibility slow him up. He scrambled through the connecting trunk with Ford hanging onto his belt and paused in front of Zachary Barstow. Barstow stared past him. "Yeah, it's Ford," said Lazarus. "Don't stare. It's rude. He's coming with us. Have you seen Libby?" "Here I am, Lazarus." Libby separated himself from the throng and approached with the ease of a veteran long used to freefall. He had a small satchel strapped to one wrist. "Good. Stick around. Zach, how long till you're all loaded?" "God knows. I can't count them. An hour, maybe?" "Make it less. I'm going to the control room. Phone me there the instant you have everybody in and the Chili broken loose with our guests on board. Andy? Slayton? Let's go." Lazarus spent the enforced wait in explaining to Libby the extremely ingenious but unorthodox controls of the starship. Libby was fascinated, and soon was putting himself through dummy runs. Lazarus turned to Ford. "How about you, Slayton?" Ford shook his head. "I've been listening, but I could never learn it. I'm not a pilot. My chauffeur drives me everywhere." "Huh? Well, then how did you get up here?" "Oh, that. I had to. The way the cat learned to swim. Well, that's one way." Lazarus turned back to speak to Libby, but was interrupted by Barstow's voice over the announcing system. 5 minutes, Lazarus. Acknowledge." Lazarus found the microphone. "Okay, Zach, 5 minutes." He had a sudden thought. "Craps, I haven't even picked a course. What do you think, Andy? Straight out from Earth to shake the busies off our tail, then pick a destination?" Libby shook his head. "No. You should head right straight down for the sun." "For the sun? For Pete's sake, why?" "Because of the space drive you asked me to develop." "But, Andy, we haven't got it." "Yes, we have. Here." Libby shoved the satchel he had been carrying toward Lazarus. Lazarus opened it. Assembled from odd bits of other equipment, looking more like the product of a boy's workshop than the output of a scientist's laboratory, the gadget which Libby referred to as a space drive underwent Lazarus' critical examination. Against the polished, sophisticated perfection of the control room, it looked uncouth, pathetic, ridiculously inadequate. Lazarus looked at the younger man, not unsympathetically. "Son, have you come unzipped?" No, I'm as sane as you are. This is a radically new notion. That's why I want you to take us down near the sun. If it works at all, it'll work best where light pressure is strongest." "And if it doesn't work, what does that make us, sunspots?" "Not into the sun," said Libby. "I want to pass the sun in a very flat hyperbola, well inside the orbit of Mercury, as close to the photosphere as this ship can stand." Lazarus looked again at the giddy little cat's cradle of apparatus. "Andy, If you're sure that the gears in your head are still meshed, I'll take a chance. Strap down, both of you." He belted himself into the pilot's couch and called Barstow. "How about it, Zach?" "Right now." "Okay. Hang on tight." The New Frontier's atomic converter accepted any mass at all and turned it into pure, radiant energy. Anything would serve. Meteors, cosmic dust, stray atoms gathered in by her sweep field, or anything from the ship herself, such as garbage, dead bodies, deck sweepings, anything at all. Mass was energy. In dying, each tortured gram gave up 900 million trillion ergs of thrust. The crescent of Earth waxed and swelled and slid off toward the left edge of the control room's giant hemispherical view screen, while the sun remained dead ahead. Down, down, down toward the sun, with speed increasing by 64 feet per second for every second elapsed. Down and still down for 15 endless hours of double weight. During this time they traveled 17 million miles and reached the inconceivable speed of 640 miles per second. The figures mean little. Think instead of New York to Chicago, a half-hour's journey even by Stratomail, done in a single heartbeat. While high boost continued, the members lay where they could, men, women, and children, crowded together like cattle being shipped, without even room to stretch out, in spaces never intended for such extreme overcrowding. The only good thing about it, Barstow reflected wearily, was that they were all too miserable to worry about anything but the dragging minutes. They were too beaten down to make trouble. Later on, there would be doubts raised, he was sure, about the wisdom of fleeing. There would be embarrassing questions about Ford's presence in the ship, about Lazarus' peculiar and sometimes shady actions, about his own contradictory role. But not yet. 15 hours out, with the orbit of Venus only 4 hours away, Libby cut the boost. The ship plunged on in free fall, her terrific speed still mounting under the steadily increasing pull of the sun. Free fall, and the weightlessness that comes with it, should have been a relief. It was not, except to the fraction of 1% who were salted spacemen. Free fall nausea, like seasickness, is a joke only to those not affected. It would take a Dante to describe 100,000 cases of it. Lazarus took the controls and sent Libby aft to sleep, the luxurious return to the womb sleep of those who have learned to enjoy zero gravity. The younger man had had almost no rest since the day the families had been rounded up. His overly active mind had spent all its time worrying the problem of a new space drive. The acceleration warning brought him instantly awake. Libby oriented himself, placed himself flat against a bulkhead, and braced. Weight hit him almost at once, 3 Gs this time, and he knew that something was badly wrong. Somehow Libby struggled to his feet and started the unlikely task of trying to climb back to the control room, straight up, at 3 times his proper weight. He had managed only a portion of the trip when resumption of freefall relieved him. He zipped the rest of the way like a salmon returning home and was in the control room quickly.
"What happened?"
Lazarus said regretfully.
"Add to vector, Andy."
Slayton Ford said nothing but looked worried.
"Yes, I know, but why?"
Libby was already strapping himself against the co-pilot's couch while studying the astrogational situation.
"Red lights on the screen. We had visitors."
Lazarus described the display, giving coordinates and relative vectors. Libby nodded thoughtfully.
"Naval craft. No commercial vessels would be in such trajectories. A mine-laying bracket."
"That's what I figured. I didn't have time to consult you. I had to use enough mile-seconds to be sure they couldn't reposition on us."
"They weren't ours," put in Slayton Ford. "They couldn't be ours. Not out here so fast. They must have been Venerian craft."
"Yeah," agreed Lazarus. "Your pal, the new administrator, hollered to Venus for help, and they gave it to him. Just a friendly gesture of interplanetary goodwill." Libby was hardly listening. He was examining data and processing it through the calculator inside his skull.
Lazarus, this new course isn't too good. I know. I had to duck. So I ducked the only direction they left open to me. Closer to the sun. Too close.
Lazarus nodded.
No question about it. We can't take it. The ship can't take it.
The sun is not a large star, nor is it very hot. But it is hot with reference to men. Hot enough to strike them down dead if they are careless about tropic noonday, 92 million miles away from it. Hot enough that we who are reared under its rays nevertheless dare not look directly at it. At a distance of 2.5 million miles, the sun beats out with a flare 1,400 times as bright as the worst ever endured in Death Valley, the Sahara, or Aden. The sun is a hydrogen bomb, a naturally occurring one. The new frontiers was now skirting the limits of the sun's circle of total destruction. Lazarus squared his shoulders.
Slipstick, it looks to me like it's about time to try out your new gadget.
He poked a thumb at Libby's uncouth-looking space drive.
You say all you have to do is hook up that one connection?
Well, that's what's intended. Attach that one lead to any portion of the mast to be affected. Of course, I don't really know that it will work. There was no way to test it.
Well, suppose it doesn't.
There are 3 possibilities. Libby counted them off methodically. In the first place, nothing may happen.
In which case, we fry.
In the second place, we and the ship may cease to exist as matter as we know it.
Dead, you mean, but probably a pleasanter way.
I suppose so.
I don't know what death is.
In the third place, if my hypotheses are correct, we will recede from the sun at a speed just under that of light. Lazarus eyed the gadget and wiped sweat from his shoulders.
It's getting hotter, Andy. Hook it up, and it had better be good.
Andy hooked it up.
Go ahead, urged Lazarus. Push the button, throw the switch, cut the beam, make it march.
I have. Look at the sun.
Huh? Oh!
The great circle of blackness, which had marked the position of the sun on the star-speckled stellarium, was shrinking rapidly. In a dozen heartbeats it lost half its diameter. 20 seconds later, it had dwindled to a quarter of its original width.
It worked,
Lazarus said softly.
Look at it, Slayton. Sign me up as a purple baboon. It worked.
Libby nodded seriously. I rather thought it would, he said.
First things first, announced Sacher Barstow. I'm as fascinated by the amazing scientific aspects of our present situation as any of you, but we've got work to do. We've got to plan a pattern for daily living at once.
He was not speaking to the trustees, but to his own personal lieutenants, the key people in helping him put over the complex maneuvers which had made their escape possible. Lazarus, Libby, Ralph Schultz, Eve Barstow, Mary Sperling, Justin Foote, Clive Johnson, about a dozen others.
We need an executive, Barstow went on. Someone who, for the time being, will have very broad powers to give orders and have them carried out. He'll have to make decisions, organize us, assign duties and responsibilities, get the internal economy of the ship working. It's a big job, and I'd like to have our brethren hold an election and do it democratically, but that'll have to wait. Somebody has to give orders now. We're wasting food, and the ship is, well, I wish you could have seen the fresher I tried to use today.
Lazarus spoke up.
How about you, Zach? You look like the logical candidate.
Barstow shook his head.
I know my limitations. I'm an engineer, not a political executive. The families were just a hobby with me. We need an expert in social administration.
When Barstow had convinced them that he meant it, other names were proposed and their qualifications debated at length. In a group as large as the families, there were many who had specialized in political science, many who had served in public office with credit. Lazarus listened. He knew 4 of the candidates. At last he got Eve Barstow aside and whispered with her. She looked startled, then thoughtful, finally nodded. She asked for the floor. I have a candidate to propose who might not ordinarily occur to you, but who is incomparably better fitted by temperament, training, and experience to do this job than is anyone as yet proposed. For civil administrator of the ship, I nominate Slayton Ford. They were flabbergasted into silence. Then everybody tried to talk at once. "Have you lost your mind? It's out of the question. But he's back on Earth." "No, he's here on the ship. I've seen him." "Here? The members would never accept him. He's not one of us." Barstow waited until they quietened. "Eve, to the families, Ford symbolizes the persecution they've suffered. I think that makes him an impossible candidate." Eve was gently stubborn. "I don't think so. We've already agreed that we'll have to work up a campaign to explain away a lot of embarrassing facts about the last few days. Why don't we do it thoroughly and convince them that Ford is a martyr who sacrificed himself to save them? He is, you know." Barstow turned to the family's senior psychometrician. "How about it, Ralph? Could it be done?" Ralph Schultz hesitated. "Well, the truth of a proposition has little or nothing to do with its psychodynamics. The notion that truth will prevail is merely a pious wish. History doesn't show it. The fact that Ford really is a martyr to whom we owe gratitude is irrelevant." He stopped to think. "But, yes, I think it could be sold." A few minutes later, Barstow had Lazarus fetch Ford to the meeting place. Lazarus did not explain why his presence was required. Ford entered the compartment like a man come to judgment, one with a bitter certainty that the outcome will be against him. His eyes were unhappy. Lazarus had studied those eyes during the long hours they had been shut up together in the control room. They bore an expression Lazarus had seen many times before in his long life. The condemned man who has lost his final appeal, the fully resolved suicide, little furry things exhausted and defeated by struggle with the unrelenting steel of traps. The eyes of each of these hold a single expression, born of hopeless conviction that his time has run out. Lazarus had seen that look grow, and had reconstructed the reason for it. Back on Earth, Ford had been important among his own kind, the short-lived. But now he was the only ephemeral in a race of Methuselahs. He had neither the experience of the elders nor the expectations of the young. He felt inferior to them both, hopelessly outclassed. Correct or not, he felt himself to be a useless pensioner, an impotent object of charity. To a person of his busy, useful background, the situation was intolerable. Ford's glance sought out Zachar Barstow. "You sent for me, sir?" "Yes, Mr. Administrator." Barstow explained briefly the situation and the responsibility they wanted him to assume. "You're under no compulsion," he concluded, "but we need your services if you are willing to serve. Will you?" Lazarus' heart felt light as he watched Ford's expression change to amazement. Do you really mean that? You're not joking with me." "Most certainly we mean it." Ford did not answer at once, and when he did, his answer seemed irrelevant. "May I sit down?" A place was found for him. He settled heavily into the chair and covered his face with his hands. No one spoke. Presently he raised his head and said in a steady voice, "If that is your will, I'll do my best to carry out your wishes." The ship required a captain as well as a civil administrator. Lazarus had been, up to that time, her captain, in a very practical, piratical sense. But he balked when Barstow proposed that it be made a formal title. Not me. I may just spend this trip playing checkers. Libby's your man. Serious-minded, conscientious, former naval officer, just the type for the job." Libby blushed as eyes turned toward him. "Now, really," he protested. "Don't see how you can duck out of it," said Lazarus. "You invented the go-fast gadget, and you're the only one who understands how it works. You got yourself a job, boy." "But that doesn't follow at all. I'm perfectly willing to be the astrogator, but I very much prefer to serve under a commanding officer." Lazarus was smugly pleased then to see how Slayton Ford immediately moved in and took charge. The sick man was gone. Here again was the executive. "It isn't a matter of your personal preference, Commander Libby. We each must do what we can. I've agreed to direct social and civil organization, but I can't command the ship as a ship. I'm not trained for it. You are. You must do it." Libby blushed pinker and stammered, I would if I were the only one. But there are hundreds of spacemen among the families, and dozens of them certainly have more experience and talent for command than I have. If you'll look for him, you'll find the right man. Ford said, What do you think, Lazarus? Andy's got something. A captain puts spine into his ship, or doesn't, as the case may be. If Libby doesn't hanker to command, maybe we'd better look around. Justin Foote had a microed roster with him, but there was no scanner at hand with which to sort it. Nevertheless, the memories of the dozen and more present produced many candidates. They finally settled on Captain Rufus Ruthless King. Libby was explaining the consequences of his light pressure drive to his new commanding officer. The magnitude of our present vector is just under the speed of light. Assuming that we hold this course, and we have to keep our velocity constant, that's the way the drive works, then the loci of our attainable destinations is contained in a sheaf of paraboloids tangent to our present course. Very well, said King. Prepare roughed courses to Type 0 stars lying inside this locus of yours, and not too far away. Say 10 light-years for your first search. Yes, sir, I have. I can't offer anything in that range in the zero types. So, lonely out here, isn't it? Well, we have Tau Ceti inside the locus at 11 light-years. A 05, eh? Not too good. No, sir, but we do have a true soul type, 02, but it's more than twice as far away. Captain King chewed a knuckle. Over 22 light-years, eh? Well, I've sweated it out in worse ships. I suppose I better try to sell it to them. And I suppose I'd better caution Ford to start some contests and things. Can't have him getting coffin fever. Play any chess? I have, sir. Libby did not mention that he had given up the game long ago, for lack of adequate competition. The New Frontiers was built with ample room for a colony of 20,000, which would have allowed the intended complement of 10,000 to double their numbers during the long planned voyage to Proxima Centauri. Thus, big as she was, the 100,000 and more of the families found themselves overcrowded fivefold. They put up with it only long enough to rig for cold sleep. By converting some recreation space on the lower levels to storage, room was squeezed out for the purpose. Somnolents require about 1% of the living room needed by active, functioning humans. In time, the ship was roomy enough for those still awake. Volunteers for cold sleep were not numerous at first. These people were more than commonly aware of death, because of their unique heritage. Cold sleep seemed too much like the last sleep. But the great discomfort of extreme overcrowding, combined with the equally extreme monotony of the endless voyage, changed their minds rapidly enough to provide a steady supply for the little death as fast as they could be accommodated. Those who remained awake were kept busy simply to get the work done. The ship's housekeeping, tending the hydroponic farms, and the ship's auxiliary machinery, and most especially caring for the somnolents themselves, turning them, massaging them, checking on blood sugar, all the tests and services necessary to make sure that extremely reduced metabolism does not slide over into death. Aside from a dozen stalls in the ship's infirmary, she had not been designed for cold sleep passengers. No automatic machinery had been provided. All this tedious care of tens of thousands of somnolents had to be done by hand. The ship lunged on, alone in the desert of night, each light year as empty as the last. Out, out, and still farther out. Each day, each month, each year, their headlong flight took them farther from all humanity. Slowly, the families built up a way of life aboard the New Frontiers. Eleanor Johnson ran across her friend Nancy Wetherall in Refectory 9D,
called the Club by its habitués, less flattering things by those who avoided it. Most of its frequenters were young and noisy. Lazarus was the only elder who ate there often. He didn't mind noise. He enjoyed it. Eleanor swooped down on her friend and kissed the back of her neck.
Nancy, you're awake again. My, I'm glad to see you.
Nancy disentangled herself. Hello, babe. Don't spill my coffee.
Well, aren't you glad to see me?
Of course I am. But you forget that while it's been a year to you, it's only yesterday to me, and I'm still sleepy.
How long have you been awake?
A couple of hours. What have you been doing while I was snoozing? Still teaching?
Yes.
Why don't you catch a few months' sleep and skip some of that drudgery? You'll make an old woman out of yourself if you keep it up. Lazarus had been sitting at the same counter, doing drastic damage to a sirloin steak surrogate. She's afraid she'll miss something, he explained. I don't blame her. So am I. Nancy changed her tack. Then have another child, Eleanor. That'll get you relieved from routine duties. It takes two to arrange that, Eleanor pointed out. Well, that's no hazard. Here's Lazarus, for example. He'd make a plus father. Eleanor dimpled. Lazarus blushed under his permanent tan. As a matter of fact, Eleanor stated evenly, I proposed to him and was turned down. Nancy sputtered into her coffee and looked quickly from Lazarus to Eleanor. Sorry, I didn't know. No harm, answered Eleanor. It's simply because I'm one of his granddaughters, 4 times removed. But Nancy fought a losing battle with the custom of privacy. Well, goodness me, that's well within the limits of permissible consanguinity. What's the hitch? Or should I shut up? You should, Eleanor agreed. Lazarus shifted uncomfortably. I know I'm old-fashioned, but I soaked up some of my ideas a long time ago. Genetics or no genetics, I just wouldn't feel right marrying one of my own granddaughters. Nancy looked amazed. I'll say you're old-fashioned. Or maybe you're just shy. I'm tempted to propose to you myself and find out. Lazarus glared at her. Go ahead and see what a surprise you get. Nancy looked him over, coolly. Lazarus tried to outstare her, finally dropped his eyes. I'll have to ask you ladies to excuse me. Work to do. Eleanor laid a gentle hand on his arm. Don't go, Lazarus. Nancy's a cat and can't help it. Tell her about the plans for landing. What's that? Are we going to land? When? Where? Lazarus, willing to be mollified, told her. The Sol-type star and its planets were now less than a light year away. In another month, deceleration would commence, and for 1 year the ship would boost backwards at 1 gravity, ending near the star at interplanetary rather than interstellar speed. Then a search would be made for a world fit to support human life. If no Earth-like planet was to be had, then they must continue on down, really close to the strange sun, and again be kicked away by light pressure to resume hunting for a home elsewhere, with the difference that this time, not harassed by police, they could select a new course with care. As soon as face permitted, Lazarus left the 2 young women and went to the laboratory where the families continued their researches in metabolism and gerontology. He expected to find Mary Sperling there. The brush with Nancy Wetherall had made him feel a need for her company. If he ever did marry again, he thought to himself, Mary was more his style. Mary Sperling had turned her fear of death into constructive channels by volunteering to be a laboratory assistant in the continuing research into longevity. Lazarus found her servicing the deathless tissue of chicken heart known to the laboratory crew as Mrs. Avidus. Mrs. Avidus was older than any member of the families, save possibly Lazarus himself. She was a growing piece of the original tissue obtained by the families from the Rockefeller Institute in the 20th century, and now she still lived and grew in the new frontiers. Mary, what keeps that silly thing alive? You've got the question inverted, she answered, not looking up. The proper form is, why should it die? Why shouldn't it go on forever? I wish to the devil it would die, came the voice of Dr. Gordon Hardy from behind them. Then we could observe and find out why. The senior gerontologist scowled at the piece of tissue. Lazarus, I'd gladly trade it for 1 pair of carp, male and female. Why carp? because carp don't seem to die. They get killed, or eaten, or starve to death, or succumb to infection. But so far as we know, they don't die. Why not? That's what I was trying to find out when we were rushed off on this damned safari. Which reminds me, Lazarus, I'm glad you dropped in. I want you to do me a favor.
Well, speak up. I might be feeling mellow.
You're an interesting case yourself, you know. I don't want your body to go into the converter. I want to examine it.
Lazarus snorted. It's all right with me, bud, but you better tell your successor what to look for. You may not live that long.
The planet they had hoped for was there when they looked for it. Green, lush, and young, and looking as much like Earth as another planet could. Not only was it Earth-like, but surprisingly the rest of the system duplicated roughly the pattern of the solar system. Small terrestrial planets near this sun, large Jovian planets farther out. But more startling than this, and even more stimulating and certainly more disturbing, was another fact brought out by telescopic observation. The planet held life. Intelligent life. Civilized life. Their cities could be seen. Their engineering works, strange in form and purpose, were huge enough to be seen from space, just as ours can be seen. Nevertheless, the dominant race did not appear to have crowded the available living space. There might be room for the traveler's little colony on those broad continents, if a colony was welcome. Captain King made up a scouting party headed by Lazarus. He had come to have confidence in Lazarus' practical sense and will to survive. Lazarus chose Slayton Ford and Ralph Schultz as his lieutenants. The rest of the party were specialists: biochemist, geologist, ecologist, stereographer, and several sorts of psychologists and sociologists to study the inhabitants, including one authority in McKelvey's structural theory of communication, whose task would be to find some way to talk with the natives. As King was about to tell them to man the boat and carry out their orders, they were interrupted by Janice Schmidt, chief nurse to the family's congenital defectives. She pushed her way past and demanded the captain's attention. Only a nurse could have obtained it at that moment. She had professional stubbornness to match his, and half a century more practice at being balky. He glared at her. "What's the meaning of this?" "Captain, I must speak with you about one of my children." "Nurse, you are decidedly out of order. Get out." She put her hands on her hips. "This is the landing party, isn't it? I've got something you have to hear before they leave." King started to speak, changed his mind, merely said, "Make it brief." She did so. Hans Wetherall, a youth of some 90 years, and still adolescent in appearance through a hyperactive thymus gland, was one of her charges. He had inferior but not moronic mentality, a chronic apathy, a neuromuscular deficiency which made him too weak to feed himself, and an acute hypersensitivity to telepaths. He told Janice that he knew all about the world around which they orbited. His friends on the planet had told him about it, and they were expecting him. The departure of the landing boat was delayed while King and Lazarus investigated. Hans was matter-of-fact about his information, and what little they could check of what he said was correct, but he was not too helpful about his friends. "Oh, just people," he said, shrugging at their stupidity. "Much like back home. Nice people. Go to work, go to school, go to church, have kids and enjoy themselves. You'll like them." But he was quite clear about one point. His friends were expecting him. Therefore, he must go along. Against his wishes and his better judgment, Lazarus saw added to his party Hans Wetherall, Janice Schmidt, and a stretcher for Hans. When the party returned 3 days later, Lazarus made a long, private report to Captain King, while the specialist reports were being analyzed and combined. "It's amazingly like Earth, Skipper, enough to make you homesick. But it's also different enough to give you the willies, like looking at your own face in the mirror and having it turn out to have 3 eyes and no nose. Unsettling. But how about the natives?" Well, we made a quick swing of the day side for a bare-eyes look. Nothing you haven't seen through the scopes. Then I put her down where Hans told me to, in a clearing near the center of one of their cities. I wouldn't have picked that place myself. I would have preferred to land in the bush and reconnoiter, but you told me to play Hans' hunches. I said you were free to use your judgment. Yes. Anyhow, we did it. By the time the techs had sampled the air and checked for hazards, there was quite a crowd around us. Well, you've seen the stereographs. Yes, incredibly android. Android, hell, they're men. Not humans, but men just the same. Lazarus looked puzzled. I don't like it. King did not argue. The pictures had shown bipeds 7 to 8 feet tall, bilaterally symmetric, possessed of internal skeletal framework, distinct heads, lens and camera eyes. Those eyes were their most human and appealing feature. They were large, limpid, and tragic, like those of a St. Bernard dog. It was well to concentrate on the eyes. Their other features were not as tolerable. King had looked away from the loose, toothless mouths, the bifurcated upper lips. He decided that it might take a long time to learn to be fond of these creatures. Go on, he told Lazarus. We opened up, and I stepped out alone, with my hands empty and trying to look friendly and peaceable. 3 of them stepped forward eagerly, I'd say, but they lost interest in me at once. They seemed to be waiting for somebody else. So I gave orders to carry Hans out. Skipper, you wouldn't believe it. They fawned over him like a long-lost brother. No, that doesn't describe it. More like a king returning home in triumph. They were polite enough with the rest of us, in an offhand way, but they fairly slobbered over Hans. Lazarus hesitated. Skipper, do you believe in reincarnation? Not exactly. I'm open-minded about it. I've read the report of the Frawling Committee, of course. I've never had any use for the notion myself, said Lazarus. But how else could you account for the reception they gave Hans? I don't account for it. Get on with your report. Do you think it's going to be possible for us to colonize here? Oh, they left no doubt on that point. You see, Hans really can talk to them, telepathically. Hans tells us that their gods have authorized us to live here, and the natives have already made plans to receive us. Eh? That's right. They want us. Well, that's a relief. Is it? King studied Lazarus' glum features. You've made a report favorable on every point. Why the sour look? I don't know. I'd just rather we found a planet of our own. Skipper, anything this easy has a hitch in it. The Jokera turned an entire city over to the Earth colonists. They were not human beings. Their physical requirements were somewhat different, and their cultural needs, as expressed in engineering, were vastly different. But a city, any city, is a machine to accomplish certain practical ends: shelter, sanitation, communication. Humans have lived in igloos, grass shacks, and even in the cyber-automated burrow under Antarctica. These humans could and did move into the Jokera city, and of course at once set about reshaping it to suit them better. Since most of the somnolents could not be waked until a food supply was assured, one of the ship's hydroponic farms was drained and its machinery broken down into parts small enough to load into the ship's boats. It never reached Dirtside. The planet's native farm products turned out to be suitable for human food, and the Jokera seemed almost pantingly eager to give them away. Efforts were turned to establishing earth crops in native soil in order to supplement Jokera foodstuffs with sorts the humans were used to. The Jokera took over. They were superb natural farmers and seemed delighted to attempt to raise anything their guests wanted. Slayton Ford, the civil administrator, transferred his headquarters down to the planet, while King remained aboard the ship. Sleepers were awakened and ferried to the ground as fast as facilities were made ready for them. Much needed to be done to provide minimum comfort and decency. The Jokera seemed always anxious to be endlessly helpful, but they were often obviously baffled at what the humans tried to do. Their culture did not seem to include the idea of privacy. The buildings of the city had no partitions in them, and they could not understand why the humans would break up these lovely open spaces into cubicles and passageways. They simply could not comprehend why any individual would ever wish to be alone, for any purpose whatsoever. Oliver Johnson, the semantician who had charge of developing a common language, found his immediate task made absurdly easy by the channel of communication through the young, sensitive Hans Wetherall. Most of the family members picked up basic Jacquerin in 2 weeks to a month after being ferried down, and chattered in it with their hosts as if they had talked it all their lives, except, of course, the usual percentage of unshakable provincials who felt that it was up to the natives to learn English. Lazarus was forced to revise his early bad impression of the Jocks. It was impossible not to like them, once the strangeness of their appearance had worn off. They were so hospitable, so generous, so friendly, so anxious to please. He became particularly attached to Creel Sarlu, who acted as a sort of liaison officer between the families and the Jocaira. Sarlu invited Lazarus to visit him in the Jocaira city nearest the colony.
"My people will like to see you and smell your skin. It will be a happy-making thing. The gods will be pleased."
Sarlu seemed almost unable to form a sentence without making reference to his gods. Lazarus did not mind. To another's religion he was tolerantly indifferent. "I'll come, Sarlu, old bean. It'll be a happy-making thing for me, too." Sarlu took him in the common vehicle of the Jocaira, a wheelless wagon shaped much like a soup bowl, which moved quietly and rapidly over the ground, skimming the surface at a speed that made Lazarus' eyes water. He had to shout to make himself heard above the wind. "Sarlu, how does this thing work? What moves it?"
"The gods breathe on the—"
Sarlo used a word Lazarus could not identify.
"and cause it to need to change its place."
Lazarus started to ask for a fuller explanation, then shut up. There had been something familiar about that reply, and he now placed it. He had once given a very similar answer to one of the water people of Venus when he was asked to explain the diesel engine used in an early type of swamp tractor. Lazarus had not meant to be mysterious. He had simply been tongue-tied by inadequate common language. Well, there was a way to get around that. "Sarlu, I want to see pictures of what happens inside. You have pictures?"
"Pictures are in the temple. You must not enter the temple."
His great eyes looked mournfully at Lazarus, giving him a strong feeling that the Jocaira chief grieved over his friend's lack of grace. Lazarus hastily dropped the subject. But the thought of the Venerians brought another puzzler to mind. Lazarus wondered what the Jocaira thought about visitors from space. They had shown no surprise. Or had they? "Sarlu, do you know where my brothers and I come from?"
"I know. You come from a distant sun, so distant that many seasons would come and go while light traveled that long journey."
Lazarus felt mildly astonished. "Who told you that?"
"The gods tell us. Your brother Libby spoke on it."
Lazarus was willing to lay odds that the gods had not got around to mentioning it until after Libby explained it to Creel Sarlu. But he held his peace. At Sarlu's home that evening, Lazarus sat through a long session of what he assumed was entertainment for the guest of honor, himself. He squatted beside Sarlu on a raised portion of the floor of the vast common room of the clan Creel, and listened to 2 hours of howling that might have been intended as singing. Lazarus felt that better music would result from stepping on the tails of 50 assorted dogs, but he tried to take it in the spirit in which it seemed to be offered. Food was brought in. The Creel family tackled it with the same jostling enthusiasm with which the Jocaira did everything. Dignity, thought Lazarus, is an idea which never caught on here. A large bowl, full 2 feet across and brimful of an amorphous mass, was placed in front of Creel Sarlu. A dozen others crowded around it and started grabbing, giving no precedence to their senior, but Sarlu casually slapped a few of them out of the way. He plunged a hand into the dish, brought forth a gob of the ration, and rapidly kneaded it into a ball in the palm of his double-thumbed hand. Done, he shoved it towards Lazarus' mouth. Lazarus was not squeamish, but he had to remind himself that food for Jacera was food for men, before he could bring himself to try the proffered morsel. He took a large bite. Not too bad. Not good, either. But it could be swallowed. Grimly determined to uphold the honor of his race, he ate on. After eating, they slept. They slept where they had eaten, without beds, disposed as casually as leaves on a path. To his surprise, Lazarus slept well, and did not wake until false suns in the cavern roof glowed in mysterious sympathy to new dawn. He felt a movement behind his back, a rustle at his thigh. He turned cautiously and found that an infant Jacera had extracted his blaster from its hidden holster and was now gazing curiously into its muzzle. With hasty caution, Lazarus removed the deadly toy from the child's unwilling fingers, noted with relief that the safety was still on, and reholstered it. Lazarus received a reproachful look. The kid seemed about to cry. "Hush! You'll wake your old man. Here." He gathered the child into his left arm and cradled it against him. The little Jacera snuggled up to him, laid a soft, moist mouth against his side, and promptly went to sleep. Lazarus looked down at him. "You're a cute little devil. I could grow right fond of you if I could ever get used to your smell." There were, inevitably, various incidents between the two races, but Administrator Ford's firm handling of the colonists averted any serious problems. Amazingly, of all the situations that arose, some of which would have been funny had they not been charged with potential trouble, the greatest difficulty arose over surnames. Jacera each had an individual name and a surname. Surnames were limited in number, much as they were in the families. A native's surname referred equally to his tribe and to the temple in which he worshipped. Creel Sarlu took up the matter with Ford. "High Father of the Strange Brothers, the time has come for you and your children to choose your surnames." Ford was used to difficulties in understanding the Jacera. "Sarlu, brother and friend," he answered, "I hear your words, but I do not understand. Speak more fully." Sarlu began over. "Strange brother, the seasons come and the seasons go, and there is a time of ripening. The gods tell us that you strange brothers have reached the time in your education when you must select your tribe and your temple. I have come to arrange with you the ceremonies by which each will choose his surname. I speak for the gods in this, but let me say for myself that it would make me happy if you, my brother Ford, were to choose the temple Creel." Ford stalled while he tried to understand what was implied. "Must this be done at once?" "Not today, but in the near future. The gods are patient." Ford called in Zachar Barstow, Oliver Johnson, Lazarus Long, and Ralph Schultz, and described the interview. "It looks like a case of join the church or get out," said Lazarus. Zachar Barstow agreed. "Well, I think we can afford to go through the motions. Very few of our people have religious prejudices strong enough to forbid their paying lip service to the native gods in the interests of the general welfare." "I imagine you're correct," Ford said. "I, for one, have no objection to adding Creel to my name and taking part in their genuflections if it will help us to live in peace." He frowned. "But I wouldn't want to see our culture submerged in theirs." "You can forget that," Ralph Schultz assured him. "No matter what we have to do to please them, there's absolutely no chance of any real cultural assimilation. Our brains are not like theirs. Just how different, I'm only beginning to guess." "Yeah," said Lazarus, "just how different." Ford turned to him. "What do you mean by that? What's troubling you?" "Nothing. Only I never did share the general enthusiasm for this place." They agreed that one man should take the plunge first, then report back. Lazarus tried to grab the assignment on seniority. Schultz claimed it as a professional right. Ford overruled them and appointed himself, asserting that it was his duty as the responsible executive.
Lazarus went with him to the doors of the temple where the induction was to take place. Ford was as bare of clothing as the Jaccara, but Lazarus, since he was not to enter the temple, was able to wear his kilt. Many of the colonists, sun-starved after years in the ship, went bare when it suited them, just as the Jaccara did, but Lazarus never did. Not only did his habits run counter to it, but a blaster is an extremely conspicuous object on a bare thigh. Creole Sarlu greeted them and escorted Ford inside. Lazarus called out after them, "Keep your chin up, pal." He waited. He struck a cigarette and smoked it. He walked up and down. He had no way to judge how long it would be. It seemed, in consequence, much longer than it was. At last the doors slid back, and natives crowded out through them. They seemed curiously worked up about something, and none of them came near Lazarus. The press that still existed in the great doorway separated, formed an aisle, and a figure came running headlong through it and out into the open. Lazarus recognized Ford. Ford did not stop where Lazarus waited, but plunged blindly on past. He tripped and fell down. Lazarus hurried to him. Ford made no effort to get up. He lay sprawled face down, his shoulders heaving violently, his frame shaking with sobs. Lazarus knelt by him and shook him. "Slayton, what's happened? What's wrong with you?" Ford turned wet and horror-stricken eyes to him, checking his sobs momentarily. He did not speak, but he seemed to recognize the older man. He flung himself on Lazarus, clung to him, wept more violently than before. Lazarus wrenched himself free and slapped Ford hard. "Snap out of it! Tell me, what's the matter?" Ford jerked his head at the slap and stopped his outcries, but said nothing. His eyes looked dazed. A shadow fell across Lazarus' line of sight. He spun around, covering with his blaster. Creole Sarlu stood a few feet away, but did not come closer, not because of the weapon. He had never seen one before. "You," said Lazarus, "what did you do to him?" He checked himself and switched to speech that Sarlu could understand. "What has happened to my brother Ford?" "Take him away," said Sarlu, his lips twitching. "This is a bad thing. This is a very bad thing." "You're telling me," said Lazarus. He did not bother to translate. Slayton Ford would not talk beyond a word or two on simple subjects. Any attempt to reach the cause of his trouble drove him into incoherent hysteria. "If you want an unprofessional guess in loose language," said Ralph Schultz, "I'd say he was scared out of his wits. But I've seen fear syndromes before. Never anything like this." "I have," said Lazarus suddenly. "You have? Where? What were the circumstances?" "Once, when I was a kid a couple 100 years back, I caught me a grown coyote and penned him up. I had a notion I could train him to be a hunting dog. It didn't work. Ford acts just the way that coyote did." An unpleasant silence followed. Schultz broke it with, "I don't quite see what you mean. What's the parallel?" "Well, here's my opinion. We've had these Jaccara doped out all wrong from scratch. We made the mistake of thinking that because they looked like us in a general way and were about as civilized as we are, that they were people. But they aren't people at all. They're domestic animals. There are people on this planet, right enough, real people. They live in the temples, and the Jaccara called them gods. Whatever they are, they're the true dominant race here. To them, the rest of us, jocks or us, are just animals, wild or tame. We made the mistake of assuming that a local religion was merely a superstition. It ain't." Barstow said, "And you think this accounts for what happened to Ford?" "I do. He met one, the one called Creole, and it drove him crazy." That same day, the Jaccara withdrew all contact with the Earthmen. It was well that they did so, else there would have been violence.
Fear hung over the city, fear of horror worse than death, fear of some terrible, nameless thing, the mere knowledge of which would turn a man into a broken, mindless animal. There was no need to vote on it. With the single-mindedness of a crowd stampeding from a burning building, the Earthmen wanted to leave this terrible place. Lazarus was needed as a boat pilot, but he was needed more urgently for his ability to manage a crowd. Zachar Barstow was telling him to conscript a group of emergency police when Lazarus looked past Zachar's shoulder and exclaimed, "Uh-oh, hold it, Zach. School's out." Zachar turned his head quickly and saw, approaching with stately dignity across the council hall, Creel Sarlu. No one got in his way. "I greet you, unhappy brother." "I greet you, Creel Sarlu. The gods have spoken. Your kind can never be civilized. You and your brothers are to leave this world. Send your brother Libby to me." Libby arrived. Sarlu held him in a long conversation. Barstow and Lazarus were both in easy earshot and could see their lips move, but they heard nothing. The silent discussion ended. Sarlu stalked off without farewell. Libby turned to the others and spoke. Now his voice could be heard. "Sarlu tells me," he began, brow wrinkled in puzzlement, "that we're to go to a planet, over 32 light-years from here. The gods have decided it." He stopped and bit his lip. "Well, don't fret about it," advised Lazarus. "Just be glad they want us to leave. My guess is they could have squashed us flat just as easily. Once we're out in space, we'll pick our own destination." "I suppose so," Libby replied. "But the thing that puzzles me is that he mentioned a time about 3 hours away as being our departure from this system." "Why, that's utterly unreasonable," protested Barstow. "Impossible. We can't get up to the ship that fast." Lazarus said nothing. He was ceasing to have opinions. Zachar changed his opinion quickly. Lazarus acquired one, born of experience. While urging his cousins toward the field where embarkation was proceeding, he found himself lifted up, free of the ground. He closed his eyes, counted 10, opened them again. He was at least 2 miles in the air. The horizon dipped down. The planet became a sphere. The sky turned black. Yet his breathing seemed normal. His blood vessels did not burst. The families came boiling up from the city like bats from a cave. They were sucked into clusters around the open ports of the new frontiers, like bees swarming around a queen. Libby sought out Captain King as soon as he was inboard and had recovered his nerve. They went to the control room with the intention of getting the ship under boost and placing a long distance between it and the world from which they had been evicted. Thereafter, they would consider destination and course. "This planet that Sarlu described to you," said King, "does it belong to a G-type star?" "Yes, it's an Earth-type world, but we can forget it. It's too far away." King activated the vision system for the stellarium, and then neither of them said anything for several long moments. The images of the heavenly bodies told their own story. With no orders from King, with no hands at the controls, the new frontiers was on her long way again, headed out, as if she had a mind of her own. As they watched, the stars suddenly disappeared, leaving the great screens showing nothing but impenetrable, unreal blackness. They were traveling faster than the speed of light. The ship slipped back into the same monotonous routine that had obtained during the weary years of the first jump. Most of the members went into cold rest. The others tended them, tended the ship, tended the hydropons. Among the somnolents was Slayton Ford. Cold rest was a common last resort therapy for functional psychoses. Mary Sperling put down the book she had been reading when Lazarus entered her stateroom. He picked it up. "What are you reading, sis? Ecclesiastes? I didn't know you were religious." He read aloud. "Yea, though he live 1,000 years, twice told, yet hath he seen no good. Do not all go to one place?" Pretty grim stuff, Mary. What's eating you? She passed a hand wearily across her eyes. Lazarus, I'm getting old. What else is there to think about?
You? Why, you're fresh as a daisy.
She looked at him. She knew that he lied. Her mirror showed her the graying hair, the relaxed skin. She felt it in her bones. Yet Lazarus was older than she. Lazarus, how long do you expect to live? There was a silence. Mary, I'm not planning on dying. But surely you don't expect us to go on forever. I'm not giving it any thought at all. I'm damned if I see any sense in my worrying about it, or you either. I propose to hang on to this life as long as I can and learn as much as I can. Mary, my sweet. Carpe, that old DM, It's the only game in town. The flight to the world that had been chosen for them took 17 months and 3 days, ship's time. The ship's officers had as little choice about the journey's end as about its beginning. A few hours before their arrival, star images flashed back into being in the stellarium screens, and the ship rapidly decelerated to interplanetary speeds. The new frontiers slipped into an orbit around a live, green planet some 100 million miles from its sun. Cautiously, King tried the controls, dead since their departure. The ship surged. Their ghostly pilot had left them. Barstow's face appeared on an interstation view screen. "Captain," he called out, "can you come aft to Lock 7? We have visitors." Barstow had exaggerated. There was only one visitor. The creature reminded Lazarus of a child in fancy dress, masqueraded as a rabbit. The little thing was more android than were the Jacera, though possibly not mammalian. It was unclothed, but not naked, for its childlike body was beautifully clad in short, sleek, golden fur. Its eyes were bright, and seemed both merry and intelligent. But King was too bemused to note such detail. A voice, a thought, was ringing in his head. "So you are the group leader. Welcome to our world. We have been expecting you." Controlled telepathy. A creature, a race, so gentle, so civilized, so free from enemies, from all danger and strife, that they could afford to share their thoughts with others, to share more than their thoughts. These creatures were so gentle and so generous that they were offering the humans a homestead on their planet. That was why this messenger had come, to make that offer. To King's mind, this seemed remarkably like the prize package that had been offered by the Jacera. He wondered what the booby-trap might be in this proposition. The messenger seemed to read his thought. "Look into our hearts. We hold no malice toward you. We share your love of life, and we love the life in you." "We thank you," King answered formally and aloud. "We will have to confer." He turned to speak to Barstow, glanced back. The messenger was gone. The captain said to Lazarus, "Where did he go?" "Huh? Don't ask me. But you were in front of the lock. How did he leave?" "Not past me." Lazarus left, whistling softly to himself. King did not recognize the tune. Its words, which Lazarus did not sing, started with, "Last night I saw upon the stair a little man who wasn't there." There was no catch to the offer. The people of the planet, they had no name since they had no spoken language, and the Earthmen simply called them the little people. The little creatures really did welcome them and help them. Their planet rode upright in its orbit. There were no seizures. Its seas were placid. Its air was warm and balmy. To Lazarus' disappointment, their new home had no lively weather. It hardly had weather at all. The little people indicated to the Earthmen where they were to land, a wide, sandy stretch of beach running down to the sea. The landscape had a careless neatness, as if it were a planned park, although there was no evidence of cultivation. It was here, a messenger told the first scouting party, that they were welcome to live. There seemed always to be one of the little people present when his help might be useful, not with the jostling, inescapable over-helpfulness of the jacera, but with the unobtrusive readiness to hand of a phone or a pouch knife. The one who accompanied the first party of explorers confused Lazarus and Barstow by assuming casually that he had met them before, that he had visited them in the ship. Since his fur was a rich mahogany rather than golden, Barstow attributed the error to misunderstanding, with a mental reservation that these people might possibly be capable of chameleon-like changes in color. Lazarus reserved his judgment. Barstow asked their guide whether or not his people had any preferences as to where and how the Earthmen were to erect buildings. He spoke aloud in words directed at their guide, they having learned already that such was the best way to ensure that the natives would pick up the thought. In the answer that the little being flashed back, Barstow caught the emotion of surprise. "Must you sully the sweet countryside with interruptions?"
"We need buildings for many purposes," Barstow explained. "We need them as daily shelter, as places to sleep at night. We need them to grow our food and prepare it for eating. We need buildings for many other uses, for almost everything we do in our everyday life."
"Be patient with me," the thought came, "since I know so little of your ways. But tell me, do you prefer to sleep in such as that?" He gestured toward the ship's boats they had come down in. The thought he used for the boats was too strong to be bound by a word. To Lazarus' mind came a thought of a dead, constricted space, a jail that had once harbored him, a smelly public phone booth.
"It is our custom."
The creature leaned down and patted the turf. "Is this not a good place to sleep?" Lazarus admitted to himself that it was. "As for food," their guide went on, "why struggle for that which the good soil gives freely? Come with me." He took them across a reach of meadow to where low, bushy trees hung over a meandering brook. The leaves were growths the size of a man's hand, irregular in shape, and an inch or more in thickness. The little person broke off one and nibbled at it daintily. Lazarus plucked one and examined it. It broke easily, like a well-baked cake. The inside was creamy yellow, spongy but crisp, and had a strong, pleasant odor, reminiscent of mangoes.
"Lazarus, don't eat that," warned Barstow. "It hasn't been analyzed."
"It is harmonious with your body." Lazarus sniffed it again.
"I'm willing to be a test case, Zach."
The stuff was oddly pleasing, firm enough to suit the teeth, piquant though elusive in flavor. It settled down happily in his stomach and made itself at home. "Will you tell me what you are in the habit of eating?" inquired their little friend. Barstow started to reply, but was checked by the creature's thought. "All of you. Think about it." No further thought message came from him for a few moments. Then he flashed, "That is enough. My wives will take care of it." Lazarus was not sure the image meant wives, but some similar close relationship was implied. It had not yet been established that the little people were bisexual, or what. Since no shelter was needed at night, they landed everyone as fast as boats could shuttle them down. Several days after the last of them had been landed, Lazarus was exploring alone some distance from the camp. He came across one of the little people. The native greeted him with the same assumption of earlier acquaintance which all of them seemed to show, and led Lazarus to a grove of low trees still farther from the base. He indicated to Lazarus that he wanted him to eat. Lazarus was not particularly hungry, but he felt compelled to humor such friendliness, so he plucked and ate. He almost choked in his astonishment. Mashed potatoes and brown gravy! "Didn't we get it right?" came an anxious thought. Lazarus looked at him solemnly.
"Bud, I don't know what you planned to do, but this is just fine."
A warm burst of pleasure invaded his mind. "Try the next tree." Lazarus did so, with cautious eagerness. Fresh brown bread and sweet butter seemed to be the combination, though a dash of ice cream appeared to have crept in from somewhere. He was hardly surprised when the third tree gave strong evidence of having both mushrooms and charcoal-broiled steak in its ancestry. "We used your thought images almost entirely," explained his companion. "They were much stronger than those of any of your wives." Lazarus did not bother to explain that he was not married. When he returned to the base, he had considerable difficulty in convincing others of the seriousness of his report. One who benefited greatly from the easy Lotus Land quality of their new home was Slayton Ford. He had awakened from cold rest, apparently recovered from his breakdown, except in one respect. He had no recollection of whatever it was he had experienced in the Temple of Creel. Ralph Schultz considered this a healthy adjustment to an intolerable experience and dismissed him as a patient. The culture and degree of enlightenment of the little people was difficult to understand all at once, because their ways were subtle. Since they lacked outward signs, in Earth terms, of high scientific attainment, no great buildings, no complex mechanical transportation machines, no throbbing power plants, it was easy to mistake them for Mother Nature's children, living in a Garden of Eden. Only 1/8 of an iceberg shows above water. Their knowledge of physical science was not inferior to that of the colonists. It was incredibly superior. They toured the ship's boats with polite interest, but confounded their guides by inquiring why things were done this way rather than that, and the way suggested invariably proved to be simpler and more efficient than Earth technique, when the astounded human technicians managed to understand what they were driving at. But it was in biology that their preeminence was the most startling. The little people were masters in the manipulation of life forms. They claimed to think a plant into the shape and character they desired. However, the little people differed from Earthmen only in degree with respect to scientific attainments. In an utterly basic sense, they differed from humans in kind. They were not individuals. No single body of a native housed a discrete individual. Their individuals were multi-bodied. They had group souls. The basic unit of their society was a telepathic rapport group of many parts. The number of bodies and brains housing one individual ran as high as 90 or more, and was never less than 30-odd. The colonists began to understand much that had been utterly puzzling about the little people only after they learned this fact. There is reason to believe that the little people found the Earthmen equally puzzling, that they, too, had assumed that their pattern of existence must be mirrored in others. A messenger entered the campsite and sought out Barstow. "We wish to help you. We offer to teach you that you may become like ourselves." Barstow pondered how to answer this generous overture. "We thank you for your wish to help us," he said at last. "But our ways are not your ways. I do not think we could understand your ways." The thought that came back to him was very troubled. "We have aided the beasts of the air and of the ground to cease their strife. But if you do not wish our help, we will not thrust it on you." The messenger went away, leaving Zachar Barstow troubled in his mind. Perhaps, he thought, he had been hasty in answering without taking time to consult the elders. Telepathy was certainly not a gift to be scorned. Perhaps the little people could train them in telepathy without any loss of human individualism. But what he knew of the sensitives among the families did not encourage such hope. There was not a one of them who was emotionally healthy, and many of them were mentally deficient as well. It did not seem like a safe path for humans. It could be discussed later, he decided. No need to hurry. No need to hurry was the spirit throughout the settlement. The members, predisposed by their inheritance to take a long view of things, began to take an eternal view. Time no longer mattered. Dr. Gordon Hardy tabled his current experimentation to pursue the vastly more fruitful occupation of learning what the little people knew of the nature of life. One thing he learned, and its implications opened up whole new fields of thought. The little people had, in one sense, conquered death. Since each of their egos was shared among many bodies, the death of one body involved no death for the ego. All memory experiences of that body remained intact. The personality associated with it was not lost. They simply went on, apparently forever. Lazarus grew bored with paradise more quickly than did the majority of his cousins. He complained to Libby, who was lying near him on the fine grass. "It can't always be time for tea. Honest to goodness, Andy. Don't you see anything wrong in being turned out to pasture like this?" Libby grinned sheepishly. "I guess it's my hillbilly blood. When it don't rain, the roof don't leak. When it rains, I can't fix it nohow," he quoted. "Seems to me we're doing tolerably well." Lazarus looked at him quizzically. "What do you do with your time, Lib?" "Me? Same as always. Think about mathematics. Or I just watch the clouds integrate. There are amusing mathematical relationships everywhere if you're on the lookout for them. In the ripples on the water. Or the shapes of busts." "Humph!" Lazarus stood up suddenly. "That may be all right for you, but it's not my pigeon. Going someplace?" "Going to take a walk." Lazarus walked north. He walked the rest of that day, slept on the ground as usual that night, and was up and moving still to the north at dawn. The next day was followed by another like it, and still another. Presently the nights grew colder, the days less balmy, and the little people less numerous. When at last he had not seen one for an entire day, he camped for the night, remained there the next day, took out his soul and examined it. He had to admit that he could find no reasonable fault with the planet nor its inhabitants, but just as definitely it was not to his taste. Basking in the sunshine might be as good a thing to do with one's life as any other, but it was not for him, and he knew it, even if he could not define how he knew it. The exodus of the families had been a mistake. It would have been a more human, a more mature and manly thing to have stayed and fought for their rights, even if they had died insisting on them. Instead, they had fled across half a universe, Lazarus was reckless about his magnitudes, looking for a place to light. They had found one, a good one, but already occupied by beings so superior, yet so supremely indifferent in their superiority to men, that they had not even bothered to wipe them out, but had whisked them away to this over-manicured country club. Lazarus' troubled reveries were interrupted by the appearance of one of the little people. "Greetings, old friend. Your wife, King, wishes you to return to your home. He has need of your advice." "What's the trouble?" But the little creature either could not or would not tell him. Lazarus gave his belt a hitch and headed south. A thought came after him. There is no need to go slowly. Lazarus let himself be led to a clearing beyond a clump of trees. There he found an egg-shaped object about 6 feet long, featureless except for a door in the side. The native went in through the door. Lazarus squeezed his larger bulk in after him. The door closed. It opened almost at once, and Lazarus saw that they were on the beach just below the human settlement. He had to admit that it was a good trick. Lazarus hurried to the ship's boat parked on the beach, in which Captain King shared with Barstow a semblance of community headquarters. "You sent for me, Skipper? What's up?" King's austere face was grave. "It's about Mary Sperling." Lazarus felt a sudden, cold tug at his heart. "Dead?" "No, not exactly. She's gone over to the little people. Married into one of their groups." "What? But that's impossible." Lazarus was wrong. There was no faint possibility of interbreeding between Earthmen and natives, but there was no barrier, if sympathy existed, to a human merging into one of their rapport groups, drowning his personality in the ego of the many. Mary Sperling, moved by conviction of her own impending death, saw in the deathless group egos a way out. Faced with the eternal problem of life and death, she had escaped the problem by choosing neither. Selflessness. She had found a group willing to receive her. She had crossed over. Lazarus ran out of the room. He charged through the settlement, ignoring both greetings and attempts to stop him. A short distance outside the camp, he ran across a native and skidded to a stop. "Where is Mary Sperling?" "I am Mary Sperling." "For the love of—" "You can't be!" "I am Mary Sperling, and Mary Sperling is myself. Do you not know me, Lazarus? I know you." Lazarus waved his hands. "No,
I want to see Mary Sperling who looks like an Earthman, like me." The native hesitated. "Follow me, then." Lazarus found her a long way from the camp. It was obvious that she had been avoiding the other colonists. "Mary!" She answered him mind to mind. "I am sorry to see you troubled. Mary Sperling is gone, except in that she is part of us." "Oh, come off it, Mary. Don't give me that stuff. Don't you know me?" "Of course I know you, Lazarus. It is you who do not know me. Do not trouble your soul or grieve your heart. I am not one of your kind. I am native to this planet." "Mary, you've got to undo this. You've got to come out of there." She shook her head, an oddly human gesture, for the face no longer held any trace of human expression. It was a mask of otherness. "That is impossible." The creature who had been Mary Sperling turned and walked away. "Mary!" His heart leapt across the span of centuries to the night his mother had died. He covered his face with his hands and wept the inconsolable grief of a child. Lazarus turned his back on the being that had once been Mary Sperling and returned to the beach. He found both King and Barstow waiting for him when he returned. King looked at his face.
"I could have told you, but you wouldn't wait. Forget it. Now what?"
Zachar Barstow answered.
"Lazarus, there's something else you have to see before we discuss anything." "Okay, what?" "Just come and see."
They led him to a compartment in the ship's boat, which was used as a headquarters. Contrary to family's custom, it was locked. King let them in. There was a woman inside who, when she saw the three, quietly withdrew, locking the door again as she went out.
"Take a look at that,"
directed Barstow. It was a living creature in an incubator, a child, but no such child as had ever been seen before. Lazarus stared at it angrily. "What the devil is it?"
"See for yourself. Pick it up. You won't hurt it."
Lazarus did so, gingerly at first, then without shrinking from the contact, as his curiosity increased. What it was, he could not say. It was not human. It was just as certainly not offspring of the little people. Did this planet, like the last, contain some previously unsuspected race? It was manlike, yet certainly not a man-child. It lacked even the button nose of a baby. Nor were there evident external ears. There were organs in the usual locations of each, but flush with the skull and protected with many ridges. Its hands had too many fingers, and there was an extra large one near each wrist, which ended in a cluster of pink worms. There was something odd about the torso of the infant, which Lazarus could not define. But two other gross facts were evident. The legs ended not in human feet, but in horny, toeless pediments, hoofs. And the creature was hermaphroditic, not in deformity, but in healthy development, an androgyne. "What is it?" he repeated, his mind filled with lively suspicion.
"That," said Zachar, "is Marion Schmidt, born 3 weeks ago."
"Huh? What do you mean?"
"It means that the little people are just as clever in manipulating us as they are in manipulating plants."
"What? But they agreed to leave us alone."
"Don't blame them too quickly. We let ourselves in for it. The original idea was simply a few improvements."
"Improvements? That thing's an obscenity."
"Yes and no. My stomach turns whenever I have to look at it, but actually, well, it's sort of a Superman. Its body architecture's been redesigned for greater efficiency. Our useless simian hangovers have been left out, and its organs have been rearranged in a more sensible fashion. You can't say it's not human, for it is. An improved model."
Barstow stared at it.
"But it looks horrid to me."
"It'd look horrid to anybody," Lazarus stated. "It may be an improvement, but damn it, I say it ain't human."
"In any case, it creates a problem."
Lazarus looked at it again. "I'll say it does." There had been much discussion about time and space, and exactly what effect Libby's revolutionary new drive had on both. Nancy Wetherall had lightly asked the mathematician what year it was back on Earth, only for Libby to tell her that the question had an unlimited number of equally valid answers, none of which could be expressed in words. So, when Lazarus stood on the bank and stared out over the broad beach at a full meeting of the families, he phrased his ritual opening comment with care. "I am 241 years old, at least. Is there anyone here who is older?" It was empty formality. He knew that he was the eldest. He felt twice that old. "The meeting is opened," he went on, his big voice rumbling on down the beach, assisted by speaker systems from the ship's boats. "Zachar Barstow." Behind Lazarus, a technician aimed a directional pickup at Barstow. "Zachar Barstow," his voice boomed out, "speaking for myself. Some of us have come to believe that this planet, pleasant as it is not the place for us. You all know about Mary Sperling. You've seen stereos of Marion Schmidt. There have been other things, and I won't elaborate. But emigrating again poses another question, the question of where. Lazarus Long proposes that we return to Earth. In such a—" His words were drowned by noise from the crowd. Lazarus shouted them down. "Nobody's going to be forced to leave. But if enough of us want to leave to justify taking the ship, then we can. I say go back to Earth. Some say look for another planet. That'll have to be decided. But first, how many of you think as I do about leaving here?" "I do!" The shout was echoed by many others. Lazarus peered toward the first man to answer, tried to spot him, glanced over his shoulder at the tech, then pointed. "Go ahead, Bud," he ruled. "The rest of you, pipe down." "Name of Oliver Schmidt?" "I've been waiting for months for somebody to suggest this. I thought I was the only sorehead in the families. I haven't any real reason for leaving. I'm not scared out by the Mary Sperling matter, nor Marion Schmidt. Anybody who likes such things is welcome to them. Live and let live. But I've got a deep-down urge to see Cincinnati again. I'm fed up with this place. I'm tired of being a lotus eater. Damn it, I want to work for my living. According to the family's geneticists, I ought to be good for another century at least. I can't see spending that much time lying in the sun and daydreaming." When he shut up, at least 1,000 more tried to get the floor. "Easy, easy," bellowed Lazarus. "If everybody wants to talk, I'm going to have to channel it through your family representatives. But let's get a sample here and there." He picked out another man, told him to sound off. "I won't take long," the new speaker said, "as I agree with Oliver Schmidt. I just wanted to mention my own reason. Do any of you miss the moon? Back home, I used to sit out on my balcony on warm summer nights and smoke and look at the moon. I didn't know it was important to me, but it is. I want a planet with a moon." The next speaker said only, "This business of Mary Sperling has given me a case of nerves. I get nightmares that I've gone over myself." The arguments went on and on. Somebody pointed out that they had been chased off Earth. What made anybody think that they would be allowed to return? Lazarus answered that himself. "We learned a lot from the Jaquera, and now we've learned a lot more from the little people, things that put us way out ahead of anything scientists back on Earth had even dreamed of. We can go back to Earth loaded for bear. We'll be in shape to demand our rights and strong enough to defend them." "Lazarus Long," came another voice. "Yes, go ahead." "I'm too old to make any more jumps from star to star, and much too old to fight at the end of such a jump. Whatever the rest of you do, I'm staying." "In that case, there's no need to discuss it, is there?" "I'm entitled to speak." "All right, you've spoken. Now give someone else a chance." The sun set, and the stars came out, and still the talk went on. Lazarus knew that it would never end unless he moved to end it. "All right,"
he shouted, ignoring the many who still wanted to talk. "Maybe we'll have to turn this back to the family councils, but let's take a trial vote and see where we are. Everybody who wants to go back to Earth, move way over to my right. Everybody who wants to stay here, move down the beach to my left. Everybody who wants to go exploring for still another planet, gather right here in front of me." He dropped back and said to the sound tech, "Give them some music to speed them up." The tech nodded, and the homesick strains of Valse Triste sighed over the beach. It was followed by The Green Hills of Earth. Zachar Barstow turned toward Lazarus. "You picked that music." "Me?" Lazarus looked at him with bland innocence. "You know I ain't musical, Zach." Even with the music, the separation took a long time. The last movement of the immortal fifth had died away long before they at last had sorted themselves into three crowds. On the left, about a tenth of the total number were gathered, showing thereby their intention of staying. They were mostly the old and the tired, whose sands had run low. With them were a few youngsters who had never seen Earth, plus a bare sprinkling of other ages. In the center was a very small group, not over 300, mostly men and a few younger women, who voted thereby for still newer frontiers. But the great mass was on Lazarus' right. He looked at them and saw new animation in their faces. It lifted his heart, for he had been bitterly afraid that he was almost alone in his wish to leave. He looked back at the small group nearest him. "It looks like you're outvoted," he said to them alone, his voice unamplified. "But never mind, there always comes another day." He waited. Slowly the group in the middle began to break up. By ones and twos and threes they moved away. A very few drifted over to join those who were staying. Most of them merged with the group on the right. When this secondary division was complete, Lazarus spoke very gently to the smaller group on his left. "All right, you old folks, might as well go back up to the meadows and get your sleep. The rest of us have plans to make." Lazarus then gave Libby the floor and let him explain to the majority crowd that the trip home would not be the weary journey the flight from Earth had been, nor even the tedious second jump. Libby placed all of the credit where most of it belonged, with the little people. They had straightened him out with his difficulties in dealing with the problem of speeds which appeared to exceed the speed of light. If the little people knew what they were talking about, and Libby was sure that they did, there appeared to be no limits to what Libby chose to call para-acceleration. The ship would not go through, but rather around or beside normal space. It's not so much a matter of driving the ship as it is a selection of appropriate potential level in an n-dimensional hyperplenum of n+1 possible... Lazarus firmly cut him off. "That's your department, son, and everybody trusts you in it. We ain't qualified to discuss the fine points." "I was only going to add..." "I know, but you were already out of the world when I stopped you." Someone from the crowd shouted one more question. "When do we get there?" "I don't know," Libby admitted. "I can't say what year it'll be back on Earth. No one's ever traveled as far and as fast as we have and then returned home. I won't be able to tell you until we're back inside the solar system." The questioner tried again. "That's not what I meant. How long's the trip going to take? How long till we get there?" Oh, yes, it'll seem like, about 3 weeks from now." The preparations consumed days simply because many round trips of the ship's boats were necessary to embark them. There was a marked lack of ceremonious farewell, because those remaining behind tended to avoid those who were leaving. Coolness had sprung up between the two groups. The division on the beach had split friendships, had even broken up contemporary marriages, had caused many hurt feelings, unresolvable bitterness. Perhaps the only desirable aspect of the division was that the parents of the mutant Marion Schmidt had elected to remain behind. Eventually, in the control room of the New Frontiers, Captain King turned to Libby. "Let's go, mister." The stars blinked out. They flew blind,
with only Libby's unique talent to guide them. On the 23rd ship's day, the stars reappeared, all in their old familiar ranges: the Big Dipper, giant Orion, lopsided Crooks, the fairy Pleiades, and dead ahead of them, blazing against the frosty backdrop of the Milky Way, was a golden light that had to be the sun. Lazarus had tears in his eyes for the second time in a month. They could not simply rendezvous with Earth, set a parking orbit, and disembark. Though they'd long come to regard the New Frontiers as their ship, officially they were pirates. They had to throw their hats in first. Besides that, they did need to know what year it was. The planets of the solar system make a clock with 9 hands. For any date, there is a unique configuration of those hands, since no planetary period is exactly commensurate with another. Pluto marks off an hour of a quarter of a millennium. Jupiter clicks a cosmic minute of 12 years. Mercury whizzes a second of about 90 days. The great clock can be read with any desired degree of accuracy over any period, but it is not easy to read. Libby muttered over the problem. "There's not a chance that we'll pick up Pluto," he complained to Lazarus, "and I doubt if we'll have Neptune. The inner planets give me an infinite series of approximations, and you know as well as I do that infinite is a question-begging term." Annoying. "Aren't you looking at it the hard way, son? You can get a practical answer, or move over and I'll get one." "Of course I can get a practical answer," Libby said petulantly, "if you're satisfied with that, but me no buts. What year is it, man?" "Hey, well, all right. On Earth, slightly over 74 years have passed since we left." Lazarus heaved a sigh. He had been fretting that his home planet might not be recognizable. The ship was placed in a temporary orbit 500 million miles from the sun, safe from any long chance of being discovered. A ship's boat had been fitted with the Libby drive during the jump, and a negotiating party was sent down to Earth. Lazarus wanted to go along. King refused to let him. "This isn't a raiding party, Lazarus. This is a diplomatic mission." "Hell, man, I can be diplomatic when it pays." "No doubt. But we'll send a man who doesn't go armed to the fresher." Again, there was nothing to do but wait. The scouting party returned from Earth 2 days later than expected. While they were maneuvering to rendezvous, King received Ralph Schultz's face on the control room screen. "Hello, Captain. We'll be boarding shortly to report." "Give me a summary now," barked King. "I wouldn't know where to start, but it's all right. We can go home." "Huh? How's that? Repeat?" "Everything's all right," said Schultz. "We're restored to the Covenant. You see, there isn't any difference anymore. Everybody's a member of the families now." "What do you mean?" "They've got it." "Got what?" "Got the secret of longevity." "Talk sense. There isn't any secret. There never was any secret." "We didn't have any secret, but they thought we had, so they found it." Ralph Schultz's party was accompanied by one Miles Rodney, whom Schultz introduced as Earth's ambassador. He did his best to explain the discovery. It's not one technique, but several. One basic process and several dozen others, some of them purely cosmetic, especially for women. The basic process consists largely in replacing the entire blood tissue in an old person with new, young blood. Gordon Hardy, the family's chief gerontologist, looked troubled. "I gave up that line of research. I found it necessary to have several young donors in order to keep one beneficiary from growing any older. There would never be enough donors to go around." "I didn't make myself clear, Dr. Hardy. There are no donors." "Huh?" "We have new blood, enough for everybody, grown outside the body. The Public Health and Longevity Service can provide any amount of it, any type." Hardy looked startled. "Blood made in vitro. We looked into that, but didn't pursue it. We should have persisted." "Don't feel badly about it.
Billions of credits and tens of thousands of technicians engaged in this project before there were any significant results. Rodney smiled. You see, they had to succeed. It was politically necessary. So there was an all-out effort. Hardy persisted with questions about subsidiary techniques, tooth budding, growth inhibiting, hormone therapy, many others, until King came to Rodney's rescue by pointing out that he was no biotechnician and that the prime purpose of the visit was to arrange details of the return of the families to Earth. Rodney nodded. I think we should get down to business. As I understand it, Captain, a large proportion of your people are now in reduced temperature somnolence?
Why can't he say cold rest? Lazarus said to Libby. Yes, that is so, King replied.
Then it would be no hardship on them to remain in that state for a time?
Huh? Why do you say that, sir?
Rodney spread his hands. The administration finds itself in a somewhat embarrassing position. To put it bluntly, there is a housing shortage. Absorbing 110,000 displaced persons can't be done overnight. King nodded to Zachar Barstow, who addressed himself to Rodney.
I fail to see the problem, sir. What is the present population of the North American continent?
Around 700 million.
And you can't find room to tuck away 1/70th of 1% of that number? It sounds preposterous.
You don't understand, sir, Rodney protested. Population pressure has become our major problem. Coincident with it, the right to remain undisturbed in the enjoyment of one's own homestead, or one's apartment, has become the most jealously guarded of all civil rights. Before we can find you adequate living room, we must make over some stretch of desert, or make other major arrangements.
I get it, said Lazarus. Politics. You don't dare disturb anybody for fear they'll squawk.
Well, that's hardly an adequate statement of the case.
It's not, eh? Could be you've got a general election coming up, maybe.
As a matter of fact, we have, but that has nothing to do with it.
Lazarus snorted.
Justin Foote spoke up. It seems to me that the administration has looked at this problem in the most superficial light. It is not as if we're homeless immigrants. Most of the members own their own homes. As you doubtless know, the families were well-to-do, even wealthy, and for obvious reasons we built our homes to endure. I feel sure that most of those structures are still standing. No doubt, Rodney conceded, but you'll find them occupied. Justin Foote shrugged. What has that to do with us? That is a problem for the government to settle with the persons it is allowed illegally to occupy our houses. As for myself, I shall land as soon as possible, obtain an eviction order from the nearest court, and repossess my home. Oh, it's not that easy. You've been legally dead for many years. The present occupant of your house holds a good title. Justin Foote stood up and glared at the Federation's envoy, who looked, as Lazarus thought, like a cornered mouse. Legally dead? By whose act, sir? By whose act? Mine? I was a respected solicitor, quietly and honorably pursuing my profession, harming no one, when I was arrested without cause and forced to flee for my life. Now I'm blandly told that my property is confiscated, and my very legal existence as a person and as a citizen has been taken from me because of that sequence of events. What manner of justice is this? Does the covenant still stand? Lazarus caught Libby's eye and silently motioned toward the door. The two slipped outside.
Justin'll keep him busy for the next hour, he said. Let's slide down to the club and grab some calories.
Do you really think we ought to leave?
Relax. If the skipper wants us, he can holler.
The ship was underway. The stars had faded out. Captain King had left the control room, taking with him his guest, the Earth's envoy. Miles Rodney had been much impressed. It seemed likely that he would need a drink. Lazarus and Libby remained in the control room. There was nothing to do. For approximately 4 hours, ship's time, the ship would remain in paraspace before returning to normal space near Earth. Lazarus struck a cigarette.
What do you plan to do when you get back, Andy?
Hadn't thought about it.
Better start thinking. Been some changes.
I'll probably head back home for a while. I can't imagine the Ozarks having changed very much.
The hills will look the same, I imagine. You may find the people changed. How?
You remember I told you that I'd gotten fed up with the families and had kind of lost touch with them for a century? By and large, they'd gotten so smug and soft in their ways that I couldn't stand them. I'm afraid we'll find most everybody that way, now that they expect to live forever. Long-term investments. Be sure to wear your rubbers when it rains, that sort of thing.
It didn't affect you that way.
Well, my approach is different. I just did my living as I went along and didn't worry my head about it. But that's not the usual attitude. Take Miles Rodney. Scared to death to tackle a new situation with both hands, for fear of upsetting precedent and stepping on established privileges.
I was glad to see Justin stand up to him, Libby chuckled. I didn't think Justin had it in him.
Ever see a little dog tell a big dog to get the hell out of little dog's yard?
Do you think Justin will win his point?
Sure he will, with your help.
Mine?
Earth needs your starship drive, Andy. You heard what Rodney said about population pressure. Ralph was telling me you have to get a government permit now before you can have a baby.
The hell you say?
Fact. You can count on it. There'd be tremendous emigration if there were just some decent planets to emigrate to. And that's where your drive comes in. With it, spreading out to the stars becomes really practical. They'll have to dicker.
It's not really my drive, of course. The little people worked it out.
Don't be so modest. You've got it. And you want to back up Justin, don't you?
Oh, sure.
Then we'll use it to bargain with. Maybe I'll do the bargaining personally, but that's beside the point. Somebody's going to have to do a little exploring before any large-scale emigration starts. Let's go into the real estate business, Andy. We'll stake out this corner of the galaxy and see what it has to offer. Libby scratched his nose and thought about it.
Sounds all right, I guess, after I pay a visit home.
There's no rush. I'll find a nice, clean little yacht, about 10,000 tons, and we'll refit with your drive. You and I will rampage around and see what there is to be seen. It'll be fun. They were both silent for a long time, with no need to talk. Presently, Lazarus said, Andy.
Yeah?
Are you going to look into this new blood for Old Caper?
I suppose so, eventually.
I've been thinking about it. Between ourselves, I'm not as fast with my fists as I was a century back. Maybe my natural span is wearing out. I do know this. I didn't start planning our real estate venture till I heard about this new process. It gave me a new perspective. I find myself thinking about thousands of years, and I never used to worry about anything further ahead than a week from next Wednesday. Libby chuckled again.
Looks like you're growing up.
Some would say it was about time. Seriously, Andy, I think that's just what I have been doing. The last 2.5 centuries have just been my adolescence, so to speak. Men, our kind of men, Earth men, never have had enough time to tackle the important questions. Lots of capacity, and not time enough to use it properly. When it came to the important questions, we might as well still have been monkeys.
How do you propose to tackle the important questions?
How should I know? Ask me again in about 500 years. That ought to give me time to poke around and pick up some interesting facts. Take those Jokeira gods.
They weren't gods, Lazarus. You shouldn't call them that.
Of course they weren't, I think. My guess is that they're creatures who've had time enough to do a little hard thinking. Someday, about 1,000 years from now, I intend to march straight into that temple of Creel, look him in the eye, and say, "Howdy, bub. What do you know that I don't know?" Libby looked doubtful.
It might not be healthy.
There oughtn't to be anything in the whole universe that man can't poke his nose into. That's the way we're built, and I assume that there's some reason for it.
Maybe there aren't any reasons.
Yes, maybe it's just one colossal big joke with no point to it. Lazarus stood up and stretched and scratched his ribs. But I can tell you this, Andy. Whatever the answers are, here's one monkey that's going to keep on climbing and looking around him to see what he can see as long as the tree holds out.
Methuselah's Children was written by Robert A. Heinlein, abridged by Bert Calls and read by Paul Burchard. The producer was Bruce Young.